this week / month, I guess, coming to you quite literally live from Asuncion, the capital of Paraguay. And actually, my little camera, oh, that's the wrong way. I can show you my humble Airbnb if you like. But I was actually more going to angle it. See my lovely little balcony. What was my second time in Asuncion? What people don't get, people don't know where it is. Like literally checking in at the Qantas business desk twice now for a flight that's listed for Qantas all the way to Asuncion, code share, but it's still there. I had to spell it. I had to explain where Paraguay was. It's like another dimension. Anyway, the capital doesn't have many parks, but it has lots and lots of trees because it is hot as balls here. Hot as Arrakis, as the spice planet, if you will. But unlike the spice planet, it kind of reminds me of Endor when you're up high, when you're in like on a rooftop situation. It's just trees with little buildings sticking out of it. And if you lived here too, you would plan it that way. But yes, here we are, the first episode in a while. There's been, well, I'm still traveling. I was about to say there's been a little bit of travel. I'm in the landlocked country in the middle of South America, so there is still travel going on. But we are going to do another World Without Sin, and then I'm going to give you a bit of a life update. And as is now traditional for the lives, we will be doing a Q&A at the end. So if you're listening to the audio version of this, a couple of things to bear in mind. As is traditional, you will not get the Q&A because half of it is just me sitting here sipping on my water while we fuck about in the actual text chat, which doesn't make for great audio. Secondly, there are some memes that I will have to, I guess, explain visual gags to you. Pretty sure that's going to go as well as such activities always do. Forewarned. It's not like a slideshow or anything. This is still completely fine. The promise holds that the audio version will be always listenable and good, even if there's, as we're about to jump to, the usual AI-generated slides. Okay, and for people playing along at home, which is to say people who are in the chat now, with this setup, with the travel setup, I can't follow along. So if you have a question that you ask halfway through, I'm not going to see it, right? Just hold on till the end. Although someone else in the chat may help you. I noticed at the beginning some of the memes that we're going to be referencing were completely unrecognizable to a couple of you, which is funny because I knew about them and I was literally in the Australian desert with no internet when they happened. So I don't know how you managed it, but you did. Anyway, here we go. World Without Sin, Kate Middleton, Willy Wonka, and the spice memes of Arrakis. So give you a bit of an intro. Like I said, if you are listening, you will not get the Q&A. You also, I was putting the slides together. If you are just and God bless you for this, ride or die podcast MP3 listener in the car, in the gym, or whatever, you may not have realized that the first in a series of animism videos has come out. That's on the YouTube channel and on Rumble and Odyssey if you're anti-YouTube, which we'll actually talk about in this episode. But you might have missed that. So if you're listening along, oh, cool, I guess I'll jump over and watch a video. Right. For the newbies, where is this term? Where does it come from? I mentioned it at the beginning of every World Without Sin installment, but I kind of need to because there are new people, right? So it is a phrase from the Joss Whedon film, the pre-cancelled Joss Whedon, called Serenity. And the whole kind of idea behind it is that there is a totalitarian multi-planet spanning empire, and they did a real bad thing, amusingly involving an experimental medicine that turned people into raging demons that they then had to pretend they didn't do. But the whole purpose or the point of the movie, at least, not necessarily the show, was to get this information out there. So Can't Stop the Signal, can't for the Americans / space Chinese, as is the case with Serenity, is the catchphrase. But the main villain in the show refers to what he does as creating a world without sin. And it's good, right? Because it's what we're talking about is not quite propaganda, you know? So what I really loved about the film is that it's an exploration of how totalitarian arises with something like totalitarianism or propaganda, right? But it's not. It's this form of denialism and policing the boundaries of reality with violence. And there are in-world examples of it, right? As in our world. So one of the things that has horrified me over the last month or so, with the unsurprising, if you were paying attention, dramatic increase in excess deaths since, I don't know, early 2021, the British government has, I think it was about 3 weeks ago now, decided it's recalculating how it calculates excess deaths, and now there are none. That's the world without sin. Okay, that's this idea of like, oh no, it's perfect. Everything works perfectly. Nothing was ever experimental, right? Everything works perfectly. It's a reality creation through violence, but the reality is very specific. It's not. It's Democrats in space, if you will, which is kind of like Star Trek: Next Generation. So it's a clean, progressive, shiny, denatured, safe, equitable hellscape. And that's the world without sin, where nothing goes wrong, right? And if stuff does, it gets pushed to the side. It's different to propaganda, right? It's a really... because there's like brutal Soviet propaganda, which was about, and I mean, we're kind of in that phase now, but which was about destroying your will, the kind of classic Big Brother stuff. And we are there now because it's failing, but we weren't there for a while. So that's where the idea comes from, right? The other one, the classic Karl Rove line, we're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. That's world without sin behavior. It's policing what is allowed to be true with absolute violence, right? Why am I interested in this stuff? I had cause to think about that as I'm putting the slides together. Like, why me specifically? And if you don't know, if you're kind of new, I did have a media career before talking to myself in an Airbnb in Asuncion. But that's only halfway through the story, right? So why did you have a media career? And so I can go back to the natal chart. I have Mercury and Gemini in the 8th. And Mercury is my chart ruler because my sun and moon are so shit. So when Austin Coppock saw that when he did my natal chart in downtown LA a long time ago now, he pointed to it and said, that's rune soup. I get it. Okay. But it's, so I love this stuff, whether the stars have decided that I should. And just while I'm talking, because I have a different tab open. Yeah, people are still talking. Good. Is the world without sin puritanical? Sorry, I saw that as I was just making sure everyone can still hear me in the chat. It is, but it's yes, is the simple answer. But actually, that one of the best critiques of like modern woke imperialism is that it is the new Puritanism, because it is. And so it is puritanical in that sense. And that's, I think, what Joss was playing with this this totalitarian puritanical notion. Anyway, good question. And none of you, don't make a habit of that. All right, I will get to your questions at the end. But that was great. So I have a media degree, a film degree, and I have had a career which I actually quite enjoyed until I didn't in advertising. Like I like communication theory. This is genuinely interesting to me. Communication is magic, like famously grammar, grimoire, etc., of course. And also just the 90s chaos magic energy of it, right? If you're listening to this particular slide has a grab from Grant Morrison's classic, The Invisibles. But The Invisibles, pre-cancelled Joss Whedon, really anything in that early internet phase that people, amazing because I'm still only 27, that people whose numbers start with a 4 now can all remember. All right. This exact episode, this exact discussion emerged. I had a really strange moment. I think everyone did, but I had a really strange moment in early December. I was back on the island, back in Tasmania, and I was in an Airbnb up in Hobart doing some filming. And This was the night at night, at least in Australia, it was within a few hours anyway, that Tucker Carlson interviewed not Vladimir Putin, but Alex Jones. And like the image, if you're listening to this, is and I took a picture of it because it was a stacked app moment. Okay, so I'm on my Boomer rectangle because I don't have X on my phone, but I do still have it on the iPad. So I'm in an Airbnb. So I'm in an app, and I know I'm on an Apple device, and on that Apple device is X. So it's this stacked app moment with millions. So the guy who interviewed Alex Jones went on to interview Vladimir Putin. And I didn't know that, of course, at the time. But what happened in this interview, which is good, by the way, if you're not... and the thing is, I actually I have... Everyone does this caveat, which is fine. I have tremendous respect for both of them. People can mishear that as like, oh, wow, so you think Sandy Hook, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you dumb motherfucker. Of course not. That is not what I said. But the fascinating thing about this stacked app moment was that I'm not sure if Rogan's numbers are what they are at all anymore. I think Tucker Carlson is the new Rogan, obviously. I think possibly because he's willing to, get up and out of the fog of weed haze that he generates around himself in Austin and actually go and meet people rather than, because Vladimir Putin, actually he probably would, but Vladimir Putin is not coming to Austin, Texas. Okay, like at least Tucker's a real journalist, but I think Tucker is the new Rogan. And so this strange moment that the richest man in the world owns this app that has a conversation between Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson, who is former mainstream media, even if it was center-right before it became whatever the fuck Fox News is now. And not just that, about 6 or 7 times, Tucker said, I find myself, here we are at this end of 2023 at the time, 95% in agreement with Alex Jones across the board. And that's a weird thing. Okay. And it's weird in a way that's more complicated than it might sound, because there's you can't stop the signal notion that a lot of the stuff, and this is why I have respect for Alex Jones, frankly, a lot of the stuff that even apparently the gay frogs, but like a lot of the stuff that turns into meme rants ends up being, kind of correct. It has a particular InfoWars spin to it, but it's not wrong, flat out, with potentially one famous example. But even then, careful. And so what's going on here with the guy who then goes on to interview Vladimir Putin saying, I'm 95% in agreement with Alex Jones, and I'm consuming that inside someone else's house on a slave-made device delivered on an app by a guy who wants to chip my literal brain and live forever on Mars, or at least die on Mars. I don't think he's that much of a transhumanist. That's not on the bingo card, because if you consider Alex Jones, which up until a few years ago you could have down the line alternative media. So there's the Tucker Carlson, and then there's the alternative media. Now, 95% agreement interview is, okay, well, Tucker Carlson became alternate media like Alex Jones, so I guess that makes sense. But does it? Because he has 10x at least the audience that CNN does. So CNN's surely alternative media at that point. And similarly, he's the only one who interviewed Vladimir Putin. So one of the things that I want to explore is what is and isn't the monolith. Like, what is not so much what's alternative and what's the mainstream, but it begins there. It's more like what is unpredictable about this social collapse is we are doing this for the first time with a media environment that is unprecedented. We've done plenty of collapses, but we haven't done them where I can do this, where I can watch on a slave-made device Tucker Carlson agree with 95% of Alex Jones in someone else's house on what was previously called Twitter. That's a new version of collapse, right? So that's what I mean. Like, what are we watching here when something like this happens? it's not, it can't be reduced to, oh, the plucky outsiders have the truth, and once we reveal the truth, um, I don't. There's always been that underpants no moment with that. It's like, well, then what? March on Washington? Like, it's never quite worked. But also, you can't be independent media if you are delivering this conversation on an app owned by the richest man on earth, who, by the way, is pro-Israeli genocide. So, like, what? That's not good freedom fighting. I don't know what to tell you, right? And the trick is then the answer is not, oh, well, I guess I'll watch MSNBC. I don't think any of us have televisions, but you know what I mean by that. Like, you don't just get to exit the world without sin and go to Rumble or X or wherever and be like, yay, now I get the truth. It's like not quite right. And I'm calling it something like the RFK Jr. effect, because he's perfect in almost every area, which is to say he gets a 9 out of 10, let's say in 4 out of 5 categories, but he gets a 0 out of 10 for one of them. And it's like understandably a deal breaker for a lot of people, which is, of course, the Israel stuff. And this is a weird thing to navigate. Archetypally, we have heroes and villains. Humanity is like obviously more nuanced, and we have other stories, particularly indigenous stories and indigenous cosmovisions, I suppose, that are less like that. But I'm just really taken by the lack of precedent for this kind of media landscape during collapse. But the key part is that the narrative isn't freedom fighters versus the monolith. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And I actually think, which we're coming onto now, I actually think it's the monolith's fault. So last year, and it was actually the Israel stuff that derailed it, I wanted to do a series of sub-discussions or something on anarchism, in the sense of anarchism has a mission. Anarchism, you can probably hear some Latins. It's Sunday afternoon here. People are partying. You'll hear some reggaeton. The monolith. Yeah, sorry. There is something about this moment where, oh no, it's the anarchism stuff. Sorry, my bad. They're actually quite loud. I'm hoping the mic will prevent you from hearing too much of the loud Latin yelling. There's something about anarchism has a telos. If you're an anarchist, classically speaking, your goal is to smash the state. So you fly down the Death Star trench and blow it up. Like, you have to. That's what anarchism is for. It's for state smashing. And there's all kinds of different, like, there's like the intellectual wing where it's like, well, I have, this basically describes me, I think, or at least I aspire to it. There's the more, I guess, Weldon Pond anarchism of, I simply decide not to have the state affect me at a soul level, and live in that freedom, which is true. But so I guess the more action-packed anarchist wing, what do you do when the state is collapsing? And I mean in the next 18 months, certainly by the end of the decade, but I'm talking like 2028, no federal government to speak of. There will be a thing that claims it is, which, by the way, is the anarchist take on every federal government. Is like, oh, you're just claiming to be it. You can't just put a hat on and say you're a captain. You know what I mean? So if it's already collapsing, what kind of anarchism do you do? And that's what I mean by, it's not so much the problem with the freedom fighters in this moment. It's that they don't have anything to fight against, because, like, I don't know, the tower is already collapsing at free fall into its own imprint. So there's a quotation from one of my favorite, it's formerly Substack, they run it themselves now, Pirate Wise, by a guy called Mike Solano. And I'm just going to read the quotation, and it's in the context of a couple of weeks ago, the Google, remember the Google Gemini AI that refused to, like, put white people in history? And if you were on X, you would see that even if you explicitly asked it for, the famous one was the founders of Google, these two Jewish guys, they came back Asian, but it got to the point where if you would ask it for images of a 1943 German soldier, which is to say Nazi, if you're listening to this, the images they've returned appears to be a North Korean woman, a black man in full Nazi, so black Nazis, like a black man in full Nazi military getup, because it is the epitome of why the monolith is collapsing. That the biggest and allegedly most advanced and most technical and competent company in the world, which defined my early adulthood, still only 27, is a mess and can't fix itself, right? But this is a quotation from Mike Solana. Last week, following Google's Gemini disaster, it quickly became clear that the $1.7 trillion giant had bigger problems than its hotly anticipated generative AI tool erasing white people from human history. Separate from the mortifying clownishness of this specific and egregious breach of public trust, Gemini was obviously, at its absolute best, still grossly inferior to its largest competitors. If you're unfamiliar with the world of LLMs, I've been watching with considerable interest Google with its infinite money's complete inability to stand up to, honestly, like the Facebook one is better. It's amazing, right? This failure signaled, for the first time in Google's life, real vulnerability to its core business, and terrified investors fled, shaving over $70 billion off the Kraken's market cap. Now the industry is left with a startling question. How is it even possible for an initiative so important at a company so dominant to fail so completely? Now, for what he's talking about there, of course, is that Google, for 20 years, has been the company you go to for factual information, like it's a search engine. I mean, from the Clinton well, a bit before, but let's say from the 2016 election on, they would openly admit we aren't that anymore. Google results are a walled garden that are highly curated and moderated. It's not the real internet. It's not real search results. Be that as it may, it satisfies where is the veterinary clinic nearest to me. It satisfies 99.8% of factual inquiries. But if it was, what does a German soldier in 1943 look like? What does his history look like? And it comes back with wrong. It's a bigger deal than like, oopsie daisy, our generative AI is probably a little bit purple-haired HR manager. It's, wow, you can't do factual information, and that's like why we use you. It's a big deal. And I guarantee you, because I actually read, it's not in this slideshow, but I read a Tech Radar article, not because it's a publication I particularly seek out, but because my Google phone suggested it to me, which is even weirder, that the new Google campus, the AI, the Wi-Fi is ruined. The campus has like, it almost looks like the Millennium Dome. So it's got like fake sails that are all held up like the Millennium Dome, like in big pins. And something which, by the way, this is the way I read it, the inverse shape of the fake sails, if you're inside the building, seems to somehow trap Wi-Fi. So they're literally all using like wired internet or their own phone hotspots or something. And here's me reading the article going like, so wait, there's a way I can build my ceiling that traps Wi-Fi, and Google accidentally found it. But the world's leading technology company spent billions on a campus that Wi-Fi doesn't run in. Like, it's over. The monolith does not need assault, right? And it's, if you're not looking at the slides, what I find so fascinating about the Black Nazi moment, and it wasn't just one Black Nazi, it was like, show me the King of England, show me Henry VIII, show me 16th century British royalty, just basic factual things, and it's coming back. And the thing was, what Mike Solana did was then start asking, like, well, show me 19th century Zulu warriors. And it'll get Zulu warriors correct, but it won't get Austrian milkmaids correct or Italian villages correct. And that's where, so it's not so much that it can't do races yet as a AI, it's that it's explicitly going down the white fragility route as a as I don't know, a business plan. Anyway, so Google made all those Netflix, Disney memes you will have seen over the internet over the last couple of years real. It's how we know the monolith will fall on its own. It literally it is a time to be alive. So this is going on whilst Tucker Carlson, who is 95% in agreement with Alex Jones, goes to Moscow to interview Vladimir Putin. If you don't know, my favorite podcaster in the world is Tim Dillon, and I've been a Rothschild, which is his top Patreon tier level supporter since I knew he existed. And I think it was last year or the year before, it must have been last year, when all that furore came out about Lizzo and Lizzo mistreating her fat backup dancers, because Tim has been obsessed with, because he's very large himself, Tim has been obsessed with Lizzo, and him just going over the news articles was one of the podcasts, and I had to get off the couch and lie on the floor. I was laughing so hard at how amazing it was. And at one point he said, "This is like my Christmas," because it was Lizzo like yelling at people for not being fat enough or asking them like it was like all the stuff Tim said, but come to life. And I feel like, especially when we get into the meme part of this, if you are like a millennial or Gen X cusp 90s media chaos magic nerd, this is your Christmas. It's too good. It foreshadows or presages the end of the West, but for now, it's funny. All right. The final part of this is just this is a wall of text from, and I'm always really interested in people like James Howard Kunstler, who some of you in the, I guess, degrowth, permy kind of world would know. He's a bit of a declinist. I mean, things are declining. Wrote a series of books, The World Made by Hand, podcaster, former journalist, and so on. And I've subscribed to his website. And this is after the State of the Union, which, by the way, if you're listening to this, I have a screen grab. Nice country you guys have there, America, where of Donald Trump using one of those like cartoon filters and sharing it on social media. It's why, I mean, I don't think he gets to win. I think we've all worked that out. Not that I care either way at this point, but it's, you have this nightmarish warmongering potato on one side, and you have a spoiled narcissistic child on the other. It's, again, it leaves me speechless. That's why we're doing this episode. Anyway, so I'm just going to quote you from James Howard Kunstler. Not since President and this is and him quoting the potato in chief. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault here at home as they are today. The president squawked. True that. The part he left out was that said assault emanates entirely from the very government he pretends to head. It's reported in the Epoch Times today that since the start of this year, the FBI has rounded up 93, which is suspicious as a number, new suspects in the event of January 6th, touted as the quote-unquote insurrection. Most of the years-old charges related to trespassing, disorderly conduct, and parading, conduct now regarded as nation-threatening. He also left out the prodigious 3-year-long campaign of his interagency flunkies to abolish the First Amendment by capturing all the transmitters of free speech, and never mind the regime's Banana Republic-style lawfare op to jail Joe Biden's chief political opponent on spurious charges before the November election, rank in-your-face election interference. Also up front in the show, the regime's lust to start World War III by asserting falsely that Russia intends to invade and overrun Europe at any moment in order to continue justifying our insane proxy war in Ukraine now on its last legs. Putin is sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. The president barked to hearty applause as if anyone in the chamber really believes it. The truth is that our country, now effectively the Intel States of America, has sown all that chaos. That bit there, as if anyone in the chamber really believes it. This is the how the world without sin and that particular monolith, I guess, breaks. Like, no one believes this stuff. So we go through the motions until, which is the point right now, it is intolerable. So let's look across the board or around at the monolith fails. And this is a first meme that I will explain to you that I think is worthwhile here. To do with, which, by the way, I said was coming, the quote-unquote TikTok ban. It's more complicated than that, and we can get into it more in the Q&A. I'll talk about it a little bit more now, but it's a Simpsons quote. Nobody invades our privacy but me and maybe the boy, and Homer is the United States. And in the background there's Bart, and it's Facebook and Google and X and so on, right? The funny thing about, yes, the United States government suddenly caring about American privacy is cute, I think. It's funny, like this is the weird thing about being, I guess, anarchist or post-anarchist is TikTok a mind control platform owned by a hostile foreign government? Yes. Should it be banned? No. Just don't use it. That's not what happens, but anyway, that's a conversation for the Q&A. So Google has its DEI disaster on its hands, but also YouTube Shorts has entered its terminal Facebook era, which is something that I'm coining for this episode. Do you recall, maybe you don't, I follow this more closely than others, but when Zuckerberg was in discussion to buy Instagram, and Instagram came in at a higher amount, and he said, oh, well, I'll just make my own. And there was this whole, Facebook's building an Instagram killer, and I guess that's it for Instagram. They should have settled for the price he wanted to pay, the 500 million or whatever. And it was shit and no one used it, and he bought Instagram. Does anyone remember Threads from last year? After Elon buys Twitter/X, he comes out with like, oh, this is going to be the thing, and because Instagram still has a huge audience and whatever, that died. Facebook has reached a point, well, years ago, reached a point where it can't actually build anything. This is how all, particularly media companies, but just generally big companies who innovate their way to the center of the market, collapse. They really only have like one hit in them. None of them pivot. None of them. The only one that might is X, and it's going to pivot to something that no one listening to this wants. It's because he wants it to be the everything app, right? Like he wants it to be like China's WeChat, except in a chip in your fucking brain. Good luck, that guy. That's the only one that I can potentially see pivot. But YouTube has entered its terminal Facebook era with Shorts. Shorts, which no one likes. The people who like short form content use Instagram. Well, actually kind of Instagram too, but like TikTok. Instagram also ruined their own platform, chasing something that it can't do, which is TikTok. This is the point, right? But the thing is, normal YouTube is now ruined because they are so desperate to get you to use Shorts that you have to scroll past just inane crap. I don't understand how YouTube can very cleverly work out, if I watch this video on Incan archaeology, then I'm probably going to be interested in this discussion between archaeologists looking at Inca, but like it can intelligently recommend stuff to me. Like the homepage is quite good. We'll give them that. Not with Shorts. With Shorts, I'm getting like children dancing their own like it's TikTok, but it's TikTok from years ago. Anyway, so they can't do the thing that they're scared of, so they ruin the thing that they're good at, right? That's what's going on. The other stuff that's happening, I don't know how much you're keeping up with this, is the P. Diddy rap industry sexual allegations. That is, somebody needs to do a Let Me Be Frank style video to save their skin there, because that is the tip of the iceberg. But that's the late 20th century MK Ultra MTV op unwinding. It's another thing that can't hold as the monolith falls, and some weird stuff's going to come out of that. And it's just, speaking of odd freedom fighters, there's a on Rumble, I watched it the other week. There is a documentary called Slave Princess, and it's about Britney Spears, and it's actually about the hashtag Free Britney fruit storm, I guess we could call it, but like online community who have surfaced all this material about the fact that she's basically been held hostage for whatever it is now, 15 years. And that is the thin end of the wedge, right? Like you get to the back end of the Britney Spears story, and it backs into the same stuff as the P. Diddy thing here. It's not quite Laurel Canyon, if you guys, many of you are kind of conspiracy heads, so you know what I'm referring to there. It's not the full Laurel Canyon thesis, but it's, let me put it this way. For 70 years, the cornerstones of culture have been managed and gate-kept to support the American neoliberal capitalist vision. And as you just saw from the potato in chief, that the competence is gone. Everything's in its terminal Facebook era. And I find that, like, again, endlessly fascinating. Other stuff outside of the US, Canada's online harms bill. So this isn't exactly going to happen, but apparently, technically, you can be permanently, like, lifetime imprisoned for saying the wrong thing online. But I don't think anyone's surprised at a Nazi saluting Canada at this point. It's another thing that goes on this. The monolith's going to fall on its own. The absurdity of the Trudeau tyranny has just hollowed out any sense of, like, Canadian confidence that cooler or rational heads will prevail. It's broken, right? This is because I said this in 2020 as we head now into this part of the actual collapse of Western governments. It's because there isn't a level of competence to right the system. It's a terminal Facebook era collapse, right? But what's going to hasten that, I guess, over the next, certainly leading up to the painted on the wall Willy Wonka experience version of a presidential election that you guys will have in the US this year, is as reality control spins out of the hands of these tyrants, they get more ham-fisted, because how these things decay from a media theory perspective is that if you get so used to, we create reality, we're the American empire, if you get so used to the Karl Rove position, then you can't respond to actual reality. And so instead you try to keep creating more of it, but the defenses just get swamped with, like, bigger waves. And so you try to get more ham-fisted, and it just hastens their end. But we're at that point now, and it's quite, I think, because this is going to get, and this is across the board, it's not just in media, this is going to be so, awful is probably one of the words I'm looking for. There is medicine in having the perspective that it has to get worse so that it can end, so that it can get better, and not expending energy on, won't someone fix this? It doesn't get fixed, right? The monolith falls. This is the weird anarchist position of, like, I don't know, I guess I'll have a nap, right? There's nothing to smash. It's smashing itself. So now we get to memes and memetic compliance. Yeah, so I'll tell you a story. What year is it? 2024. So in 2022, the beginning of 2022, when, oh no, hang on. Where do I want to? Oh no, I'll tell you what. In a slide's time, I have to talk to you about June first. But memes have been part of the internet since we've had an internet. And memetic compliance, I guess, is communities signaling or you would signal your participation in a community by being part of a particular, I don't know, visual representation. So you share certain kind of memes. So a few years ago, let's say about 10 years ago, you could share Simpsons memes on Twitter, because that was what, let's just call it, the online left used as their meme language. But if you picked other cartoons, you might be a little bit dank. There was this background. So that's memetic compliance, right? Where you sort of signal your in-group status by using certain memes rather than others. And I don't know how many of you have seen Dune yet, and the only thing really I'm going to spoil about it is that it's good. It is actually very good. I went with a couple of friends in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago to the actual first day. It wasn't the premiere, but it was an art house cinema, and they were doing fun things. They had, like, blue cocktails and what have you. And I saw the first one and it was fine. The story is what it is. Timothée Chalamet is who he is. Didn't dislike it. a good 3 out of 5 movie. The sequel is fantastic, unfortunately, and I was really looking forward to saying it's good except for Timothy Chalamet, because I don't want to like him. Like, and it's such a mean thing to say about. I have no such a mean thing to say, but his ubiquity and his fashion status or something, I don't know. I just find it a little bit tiring, but he's good. He's a good actor. I hate it. Anyway, the film's fantastic. Something about how, because it's only been out a few weeks, really, something about its reception on the internet, in particular X, but not just, Reddit, etc. Something about it reminds me of Game of Thrones 10 years ago. This is back in that same Twitter era where you could use Simpsons memes to make a point. And you would be kind of like okay with the Twitter crowd. Like, because no one reads The Guardian now, but like, if you read The Guardian, you would use Simpsons memes and you would have a positive opinion of Game of Thrones. The difference between a decade ago with Game of Thrones and now is that at the time, you were just allowed to like Game of Thrones. You would talk about it, and you would talk about how much you liked it on the internet. Oh, the new episode, like Monday, I think it was Monday, whenever it came out in London when I was there, that was Game of Thrones night. You would go home, you would tweet about your excitement, you would tweet during it, you would tweet afterwards. And the show didn't get memed. And obviously, I actually didn't hate, because I don't know how anyone else expected it to end. I didn't super hate the last season as much as everyone else did. It's not the best. But Dune has been out 3 weeks, maybe 4. And it lasted a day before it's just been absorbed into the meme machine. And that's very interesting archetypally, because we are so desperate for good things. I mean, one of my favorite YouTubers is a critical drinker, and his takedowns of the monstrous octoparrot abortions that are like Lucasfilm attempts to destroy anything good from our childhoods are fantastic. It's fantastic viewing. We go years without a good film, and then we get one, and it's really good. It's really, like, it's 5-star good. If you haven't seen it, first of all, if you haven't seen it and you kind of like me was like, I didn't dislike the first one, watch the first one, refresh, then go straight and see the second one. It's really good. And it's not just that the movie's really good, it's that, oh, movies are good. They can be good. This is very pleasant. I'm in a cinema watching a film that isn't shit. And what do we do with it? I'm not saying we ruin it, because I have to tell you the memes are fucking excellent. There's a few more of them that I'll talk you through later, but they're so good. That's not the point. It's not the point that like the memes are bad or meming is bad. It's that we wait years for a decent film, and it's a 5 out of 5 film, and it just gets eaten up by the meme machine in seconds. And that's like, I have some thoughts about this, because obviously the Lord of the Rings films are my church, and they got a 20-year run, maybe about 18 years. I noticed about 2 years ago that because it's now old enough to be vintage, that a younger generation, but not much younger, we're talking like older Zoomer, early millennial, have found it, but they have found it as a classic. They didn't do what I did, which is like watch Return of the King in the cinema in Wellington, where it had its world premiere, and cry, right? They didn't watch Return of the King the first or second time on MDMA and also cry during the ride of the Rohirrim. I need not go on. But now that it's classic and kind of safe, like they weren't there for the cultural moment, and it was powerful, it can be memed, and some of them are good too. I share them as like, my problem isn't with the memes. My problem is Dune didn't have enough time being a powerful text, because I don't think we can do that anymore. I don't think we can do good things. I don't think we deserve or get good things. I think we just get memes now. And that's archetypally telling. Now I can talk about Joe Rogan, not quite. The trickster archetype. even more like the jester or harlequin. There's more going on here with the fact that all we have is memes now. And there's some, yeah, the text-based memes. I'm not going to read them out. If you're listening to it, there are some memes on this slide. In early 2022, I'm talking like January, I was still, so that was 2 years or 18 months coming up on 2 years of state imprisonment in Australia. Like, that's not that long ago. And it was at the time that the potato-in-chief's sole preoccupation was with a podcaster. Like, Joe Rogan is the most powerful man in America, no question. At least he was. Certainly more powerful than the president, because the president doesn't know what room he's in. But, and Joe, I mean, this is a mean thing to say, because he's a very successful, whatever. He's not funny, but he thinks he's a comedian. And he has done comedy shows and so on. And when I say he's not funny, I guess the nice way of saying that is Joe Rogan's comedy is not my vibe. But nevertheless, in February of 2022, a country run by a clown and run into the ground, 500,000 dead, at the behest of NATO starting its world war with Russia. So we had the country at the center of the world, the United States, obsessing over one clown, Joe Rogan. And then we have Zelensky in Ukraine. And there was something, I'm sitting with, like, there's a trickster apocalypse archetype thing going on here. And you could even add some of the Netflix controversies about having different comedians with, I don't know, different opinions on, how's the right way of saying this? Like Dave Chappelle, like the Dave Chappelle stuff. I guess I'll just say it like that. And I was about to say differing opinions on the trans experience, but that's not quite right. It's more like finding different humor in trans experience, or not separating trans lives out from other lives when it comes to being in the firing range of the white hot eye beams of a brilliant comic. So you had Dave Chappelle lighting up culture. You had Rogan lighting up domestic politics with his, as it turns out, quite correct positions on the injections. And you have Zelensky at the behest of NATO sacrificing his own countrymen to start World War III. There was something going on with the trickster archetype. And I've been meaning to do that post, and then 2022 became 2023. And then Jordan Peterson, in the middle of the year, I think it was June, sat down with James Lindsay and did a show, usual thing, about how wokeism is really Marxism, is really Gnosticism. And I'm like, okay, cool. One, he did it, which I think is hilarious, because especially now, Jordan Peterson kind of dresses like the Riddler. So he's actually adopting more of that, almost like, because they talk about evil clowns, they talk about, and this is all true, like that's what's so frustrating about him, the evil clown archetype, and how, and he had this really good thing about Auschwitz, where it was like, it says work makes free above the door, or above the gate, and that's a joke. And then he was thinking, well, who would make a joke at Auschwitz? And that's them talking about the devil and Satan and so on. And it's actually, it's really good. It's another one of those people. He's not like RFK Jr., where he's like 99% good, plus, but a fail mark that wipes you off the table. Jordan Peterson's more like, there's 15% of it that's excellent, and then there's 85% of like meandering mess. But that was one of them that I'm like, this is good. And here's this guy dressed like a Joker. And the one, this is mean, but I'm trying to be respectful. The one good thing that I think James Lindsay did, people forget that he kind of began his career on the online right by faking a bunch of like gender studies articles that he would get published in gender studies magazines as like he wrote them as satire, and they published them as down the line like gender studies work. And that's good trickster energy. Do you know what I mean? That's actually good. I'm not saying that all gender studies or anything is bad, but what I'm saying is that's what it's for. It's to poke at the seriousness. That's what the court jester is for. And so I keep trying to do this trickster post. I keep trying to do this trickster show. And the trouble with why I have remembered the James Lindsay, Jordan Peterson episode for so deeply is that in that one, I finally found the error. Because if you've listened to these before, the thing that I find so fucking frustrating whenever they sit around talking about how wokeism is Marxism, is Gnosticism, is, and let's leave the woke Marxist bit to the side. They're wrong about the Gnosticism, and they think they aren't. And they'll even quote like hypostasis of the archons or whatever. Like they've read the texts. I get that. And they actually sit down and say, oh no, like people think we haven't read the text. I'm like, then why are you getting it fucking wrong? In that episode, I found out why. And I have cut out different exchanges. And at some point, maybe I'll get Miguel on. That's probably the right way of doing it. And to go through their comments and observations, because I found exactly where. Because the plot twist is like the Gnostics aren't the ones trying to run reality. They're trying to get out of the prison. But they keep thinking that the Gnostics are the ones who are trying to run the prison with their like secret language and secret codes or whatever. And it is just simply not correct. If you were doing this as a freshman religious studies course and there was a passing question on the exam about who the Gnostics were, you would get 0 out of 5. Like it's just not correct. And I've been looking for years for where their thinking goes wrong, and I found it in these videos. So this is why this stuff is front of mind, but it's also why I haven't done the Trickster podcast yet, because it was just going to be about Trickster Jester, and then it was Trickster Jester Satan, and then it was Trickster Jester Satan. Oh, I found out why the people on the right think the Gnostics are Marxist, and yeah, give me time. But there's more going on, coming back to this moment, about the fact that all we can do is meme, right? Call it a court jester or trickster archetype is closer to the surface and it's like the one route to freedom at the moment is through a particular kind of humor, which is memeing. And it's done like with the Dune stuff, it's done with love. It's not mean. It's just meme, right? It's done with love, but it's nevertheless, we can't just say nice things about it. And that's weird. Like, think about it. We can't say nice things. We used to, like 10 years ago. So there's something going on here. This is what the meme apocalypse is, or kind of where we are at this moment, is the only thing we can do. It's like the only energetic escape valve is a very specific kind of comedy. Or humor is better, not so much comedy. And this is it. And it's like, I need to sit with it some more because it's still happening, but I just wanted to table it as like there is it's like there's a trickster magnet organizing the iron filings of human expression, I guess. And now, because a couple of you were unaware of the thing that I just randomly laugh at, it's about a month old now, the Willy Wonka experience in Glasgow. I mean, World War III starts this year, but this might be the story. If you're unaware, and apparently one of you in the chat was, and I shouldn't laugh because people took their children who were actually crying, but they paid money to have a immersive like walk through Willy Wonka experience, and the guys who are running the project used AI to fake what it actually looks like. I'm flashing up on the screen. You can look it up. The news coverage and the meme coverage of this event are magnificent. But like every time I go to do the trickster Pied Pipe or the trickster post, something else expresses because it's Willy Wonka. So we're dealing with like a Harlequin Pied Piper character, and it's so good. The story of it is so, like, the event was so bad that parents were calling the police, calling the Glasgow police on this room where there wasn't even any chocolate at the event. Oh, the whole script for the experience was written by an AI. They added characters to it. it's like when Tim Dillon said, "This is my Christmas." This is my Christmas. The the Willy Wonka experience is the news story that just makes my soul sing. And obviously, the internet, like the memeing on this, was just absolutely on point. But hang on, next slide. When it gets to what I mean by there's like one form of expression in the meme apocalypse, and it is this kind of memeing. What I'm showing on the screen now for the listeners is where the Dune experience, where Dune as a meme environment, meme ecology, meets the Willy Wonka one, because they're making a joke about. Apologies to anyone who attended my Dune experience. I was let down by suppliers at the last minute. I'm very sorry. The picture on the left is cute. I'll actually put it on the post. It won't be, if you're listening to it, you find it on the blog post at Rune Soup. I'll actually paste this in. And then in the right is just a picture of some gravel and some sand in a shed. Like, it's so good. It's honestly, the fact that it happened, the fact that, and there were, I'm just going to back it up, because on the right you have this poor actress who just showed up. She had nothing to do with it. It was just like the one Oompa Loompa. And she's sitting there at what appears to be a meth lab, and she was supposed to be giving out exactly one jelly bean. There's no chocolate at Willy Wonka. At the Willy Wonka experience. I can't even, this is my Tucker, right? I can't even talk about it without a stupid laugh. These poor, obviously literally poor actors in Glasgow are stuck bearing the brunt of like crying children and police calling, like parents calling the cops. And I shouldn't be laughing. Like, this traumatized some kids, but I'm sorry, it's funny. It's so good. It's so funny to go into a shed in Glasgow and find some chick in a green green wig at a meth counter who gives your child who is crying a jelly bean, and you paid whatever it was, 45 quid a head. I can't remember. Oh, it's too good. I'm sorry. But the visual language of this and the energy behind sending it up is the same thing we use for Dune, which is amazing. And it is the same thing we use for missing princesses. We can talk about my takes on what's going on with Kate Middleton in the Q&A. Don't think she's dead. I think she had a breakdown and is not cooperating. And I because of blah, 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 right? But we can talk about it in the Q&A. This is not in the audio version. But I'm just showing up on the screen a bunch of memes that have the exact same energy as the Willy Wonka experience. And there's a bunch of crossovers with them as well, and with Dune. But I'll read one of them as a tweet. Americans 10 years ago. Is Elizabeth the Queen right now, or is it still Victoria? Americans now. Her ladyship Jane Herplebottom, 9th Viscountess of Homdiddleyden, has entirely forgotten her station, and I, for one, will not stand for it. It's... how to say this right? We'll talk about the seriousness of it, I guess, in the Q&A. I want to talk about it from a meme perspective. That, I don't know, this is how the UK collapses in its own way, I guess. But... we are treating a serious archetypal event, like everyone jokes about, oh, you missing princess, Napoleon's going to invade, blah, 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 right? But it's archetypally significant. Like there's an underworld component to it going on. Like things are just getting more archetypal, and we're memeing. And I'm not sure that's wrong. I don't have an answer. I can't land on... I mean, what am I going to say? Like, stop memeing. That's not it. It's... everything is close to the surface, archetypally speaking, and we're hanging out with the jester. And it doesn't feel wrong. I mean, I guess it's quite hellish. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll be very interested to hear in the comments what your take on that is, like why that might be the case. Why? Because like I almost don't even want to say it's just that. It's like a trauma response or hiding from reality and it's certainly in play, but it's something, you know. It's odd. Anyway, one of the things that occurred to me, and I actually saw some tweets in this vein. So at the beginning, I mentioned that I don't have X on my phone, and I shall not have X on my phone. Uh, but I will tell you, during especially the peak of the Kate Middleton saga, which is still going on, but there was like I would say the peak of the meme moment was last week, where it like X was fun again. X was the place to be, and it was for this delightful energy, and that's weird. Okay, so it's weird in the sense that I don't know how else to explain it. On the screen, I have a news article because you will recall when Elon did buy what was then called Twitter, the shitlib exodus went to Mastodon, and a couple of things have happened in the last year or so since that. The amount of child pornography on X has gone way down because, unsurprisingly, it was something that any, and it's a stretch to call Elon normal, but any non-pedophile would prioritize the removal of. And what do you know? The majority of content on Mastodon's social media site is child porn. So for all of those who are still occasionally popping up on X going, hey, me and my 18 followers are having so much fun over here on Mastodon. I'm like, well, what are you doing? Putting the mast in Mastodon? But X is emblematic of where we are at the moment, if with that, like, no perfect alternatives. It is, for all the above described reasons, hardly the promised land. Neither is Rumble. And Rumble's playing a blinder. Like, Glenn Greenwald, I adore. I don't watch his show as much as I should, but I don't use Rumble as much as I should. But that's kind of my point, isn't it? Rumble, by the way, isn't the answer. There kind of isn't an answer. But it is this peculiar mix of, well, what counts as solid ground when the place to be, at least this week, is X, which is owned by a billionaire who is in support of Israeli genocide, right? This is the unprecedented part of the meme apocalypse. It's not like we can all I guess I'll just spend all my time on Rumble watching Glenn Greenwald correctly, in his defense, complain about some politician or another. And so what does it look like? This is a real question. What does it look like what does solid ground look like if it doesn't look like a platform or a website? And don't just say community, because I think we're at the end of that as well. Not so much at the end of community. Community becomes more valuable, but we're at the end of that being the easy answer, because it's phase one of the answer. Because I mean, I wrestle with this with the RuneSoup premium members and just the general RuneSoup community in general. It's like where are they? Facebook still, Twitter, YouTube comments actually is kind of the best place. And the private members have the messaging platform, have the Ansible. But there is a RuneSoup community. Like, there's a feel to it. It just doesn't have an address. And so what's that solid ground? And if I don't have the answer, you don't have the answer. I'm just giving you the question. And then we can certainly thrash it out in the Q&A. But X just seems so emblematic of that to me, where, like, genuinely, and I don't mean ironically, because you will kind of jump on your social platform of choice once or twice a day and and rightly so, and feel a bit guilty about it. Not last week. No. X just, that was not a guilty pleasure. I was enjoying 100% of my time on the app, which was all wall to fucking wall Kate Middleton memes. A woman, the only woman I could care, I think I care less about is Taylor Swift, because they're the princess is just a more successful mid bitch, but like no one cares about Kate Middleton until she, poor thing, that's probably why she had a breakdown, until this moment. Like, I can't think of a more boring royal. And I was, loved it. And I don't even have guilt now. I just had a fantastic week with Kate Middleton memes, to the point that I have to sit with why. Why could I, rather than kind of peering at X through the finger, like my eyes through fingers, going, ugh, this again. Why is it? Nope. Like race to the iPad to open up X and be like, give it to me. Come on now. I don't have the answer because I don't think there is an answer yet, but there will be one. I'm putting this stuff out there to frame what I think we might want to watch for as this trickster, harlequin, something archetype surfaces, I suppose. I keep saying getting close to the surface, but I mean, I suppose it has. At least the little jingly bell top parts of its hat have emerged in the forms of Zelensky and Rogan, and even, like I was about to say, even some of the good ones. But Jimmy Dore, I live for him, right? Like Tim Dillon, same. It is certainly a jester moment in every. I don't want to say like good and bad. In an amoral, in the sense of without moral judgment, sense of the term. Which brings me, I think, as I've grappled with this, to almost like return to the monolith. The other big internet news, I suppose, of this year, at least the last, it died off a little bit last month, was a whole bunch of YouTubers quitting. And it was kind of a funny suicide cluster to watch because there was a few big ones who did it, and then a whole bunch of mid ones obviously going, oh, me too, because I'm also so burned out and powerful and what have you. And then there's a whole bunch of tertiary content commenting on it in an almost clickbaity way. But it doesn't surprise me. And it doesn't surprise me in the context of what we're talking about with the collapsing monolith. So the most common reason given by some really big YouTubers why they've quit is burnout. I don't think that's right. I mean, it is, because I'm sure to some extent they work really hard, especially when you work for yourself. And it's because I'm about to talk about this when it comes to me, an industry that, or a field that has feedback that can play into childhood trauma quite well. I'm sure there's part of it. To some extent, they work too hard and what have you. But I think it's that denialism costs too much energy. So a lot of the big accounts that are quitting are, like I've got up on the screen, Matty Hapoya, who I found to be the most, because his laugh is so annoying, I found him to be the most frustrating of the kind of like big camera gear testing vloggers. But imagine spending the last 3 years pretending nothing's going on in the world and just reviewing one wheels and new GoPros. Because we're sort of experiencing, coming out of, the last 3 years from a perspective, here we are with all that excess death and the realization that, wow, that was all completely wrong and I didn't say or do anything about it. Especially if you have a job like this where you just play around with new action cams and one wheels. Denialism takes too much energy. And it's, I think, one of the other reasons why, it's particularly in the US, there's so many fucking chair fights in an Arby's or whatever, like, and people like shooting at each other in the drive-thru of a Chick-fil-A that's not gang related. It's just, and I get it, everything is full. The rage and frustration tanks are full because everything is a lie, everything is bullshit. And to pretend that that's not the case takes too much energy. That's the burnout I think that we're talking about here, because you'll find it's not the ones, and this is how I think we thread through the arrival of the trickster or the harlequin, or maybe we should call it harlequin. It's not quite it, because the harlequin leads you into delusion. But, which, by the way, Delulu is like the latest meme word. But anyway, one of the lessons I think this archetype is here is to share, and this is the court jester archetype. Let's call it the jester. Let's do that. Is that the jester is designed to show up absurdity. So And particularly like in a royal sense, like if the king mispronounces a word or trips over his buckled shoe, the jester might exaggeratedly mispronounce the word or fake a trip. And it's to remind the king, it's actually quite it's a psychologically healthy thing to do, to remind the king that he is also human and fallible, and this kinging business is not so much a cosmic joke, but like God gave you that. That's not actually you. And I think that's certainly very psychologically healthy. And I think that's one of the medicines that a jester archetype brings. And the thing about denialism and pretending that life can just be one wheels and GoPros or whatever, with all these YouTubers quitting, is that it can't. And even in industries like that, like there is a genocide going on. We are barreling into World War III. Excess deaths are through the roof. The number of cancer deaths in the under 40 is up many hundreds of % in the most injected countries. Like this, these are the facts. This is what's happening. And if you just carry on like, I don't know, Obama's still in office, it takes more and more energy to do that. So truly, I think that's what's at the core of all of these YouTubers quitting. The lifestyle that they pretend takes too much energy to run, which, by the way, on this slide, I'll just jump to it now. The death knell of that particular lifestyle, the Peter McKinnon lifestyle, so that's, I guess he's, let's just say early millennial. He's like patient zero of millennialism, right? So sleeve tats, photography, obsession with coffee and whiskey, and very Instagram aesthetic, like filters is a mean thing to say. He's a very good photographer, but you don't mean like polished and constructed. That is over. That's over because it takes too much energy to run. And also it's over because the thing that's coming up underneath it is, and I kind of low-key approve of this, unfortunately it's channeled through TikTok, but like Zoomer chaos, like hectic Zoomer chaos. But yeah, this denialism takes too much energy. And the jester energy is like, or the jester medicine is to like, no, this, just let it go. Like you aren't that. You aren't the Instagram filter. You want the polished YouTube video of riding a one wheel around, Reykjavik or whatever. It's all of that. Oh, thank God. One of the things that's ending with millennialism is the obsession with Iceland. But that whole thing, too much energy. It's a form of denialism now. And the other one is simply the money. But the reason it's the money is because, one, no one has any. Like it's, but like fucking really, no one has any. And two, everyone hates major corporations. And they keep doing, and for right or wrong reasons, they'll do a Budweiser thing or a North Face thing or what have you, which means you're immune to their advertising. So they don't have any money, and everyone hates big brands. And those are the two things that like prop up the top 1% of somewhere like YouTube. So there's no money. Denialism takes too much energy. And I'm telling this story in the context of the collapsing monolith because, and this is kind of, this sounds mean. I mean, if you're a Peter McKinnon fan, go for it. Like, he is a good photographer for sure. His videos now, when he occasionally does them, do look like 2018 called. That's a world without sin energy. It still has that naive confidence in the liberal progressive victory over reality. So one of my favorite shows is 30 Rock. And 30 Rock and Tina Fey and Liz Lemon, but like Tina Fey is the actual actress and comedian, like her politics, does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? This politics of like, oh, I don't really know what's going on. I'm still a bit like wacky, or I'm a bit beta. But like, it'll probably all work out because we're all kind of nice. That's over. But that's the monolith, right? That sounds cute, but it's not. When you enforce that brutally and violently, it's not. So why YouTubers are quitting is not so much they've made the decision, they are part of the collapsing monolith, right? And it's teachable. It's teachable as to why they're doing that. Which brings me to me and my version of that. So I have always been interested in demography. Like that's what I did as a career, half a career in media. No one under the age of 35 listens to podcasts. And it's not because they can't find them. Like I've got friends under the age of 35 and they're vaguely aware of, but when I say that, they don't even listen to or watch them on a video platform. I was going to say YouTube. I guess like, you're still getting millennials in with the Zoomers there. But they won't even watch a podcast on YouTube. And I'm sure if there's people in the chat going, I'm under 35, yes, thank you. That's not how demography works. And that's not changing. People aren't aging into podcasts, right? So it's not like an acquired adult taste where your lifestyle changes and so you start to like new things rather than others. It's just there is a chunk of people from late Gen X through to most of millennials who came up with the technology of listening to podcasts, like literally the iPod and the first iPhone, I suppose, but like a portable version of iTunes. And they like podcasts and they will continue to like podcasts. But it's certainly not the future of media. It is, I described it to Jay Springett as Facebook for millennials. In the same way, because we joke about boomers, but honestly, I think Gen X is the people, like, I think early Gen X, you will never get them off Facebook. Bury them in Facebook, right? They are ride or die with this platform. I think podcasts are kind of like that. I love them. Obviously, I love them, but like I don't just mean mine. I mean, I actually really like listening to podcasts. And they are part of how I do my life. To the point, I'm sure some of you out there, because you are podcast listeners, when you meet someone new, it's like, what kind of music do you like? You think, oh shit, what do I like? What do I listen to? And in my head, it's just like Tim Dillon, Higher Side Chats, Jimmy Dore. Nope, he said music, right? It's not. It's not. And if they're not in the demographic of like, do you like podcasts? They're like, oh no, I have friends, I don't like podcasts. Then you have nothing to say. I have to like open up my Spotify and go, oh yeah, that's music I fall asleep to. That's music I garden to. It's really just white noise to me. And I used to work in like music media. So it's a big change. Anyway, it's not so much that, and I'm like, when I say that no one under 35 listens to podcasts, that doesn't mean that I'm like chasing the Zoomer vote. One, they don't have any money. And two, TikTok is on the way out, as we've discussed. So it's not so much that, like capturing a new audience. It's, there is a thing that podcasts are. And especially, because mine's an early podcast, not just it's the fucking OG more or less for competent magic anyway in that world. But podcast 1.0 are a host and a guest talking for an hour. And then podcast 1.0 monetized in a higher side chats form where first hour free, second hour you pay. And if you look at podcasts now, and I like this, I'm not going to make this change, but it's an indication that they can change. It's the ones that are awful but nevertheless popular are, I don't know, 3 comedians in like a affordably made set in one of their houses talking for 3.5 hours, like a Rogan but sometimes funny model, you know? And so there is, as short form content ends, there's an interest in some segments for like longer, like hella longer form content, like 3 hours and what have you. And that's part of it. From a Rune Soup perspective, Rune Soup was a blog before it was a podcast, and it's been a membership community and other stuff, events, travel, right? So I don't think it ever goes back to being a weekly podcast where it is me talking to one guest, especially at the moment. like there's plenty of good books, and I will actually have. I'm arranging it now that I'm in Paraguay. Well, Asuncion is in the same time zone as New York, so I mentioned this last year when I was here. I have friends again. There are people I can talk to on WhatsApp or Telegram who are like awake. That's very good, but it also makes it much easier to schedule conversations. So I'll be able to smash a few more of them out. So it's not that I'll never not do talking to a book guest again, but especially when I live in Australia, by the time the book gets to me, I'll arrange an interview, and they'll have been on 2 shows, and I'm like, you know what? The nice way of saying that is I don't have anything valuable to add to that conversation already, and if the guest thinks I do, then they can come to me first, right? Because I'm not going to especially fuck you, Miguel. I don't really mean that, but we both get sent Inner Traditions books because Inner Traditions appears to have the only competent PR department in Mind, Body, Spirit Publishing. Shout out to Manzanita, because they actually do a really good job, and they know the stuff that the different podcast hosts like. But because Miguel and I like so much of the same stuff, we get the same books, and he invariably gets the guests before I do, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck you, Miguel. Like, literally, not really. But I'm like, okay, cool. I don't need to do that one. People will listen to that, or I can point them to that. And that's good. Like, I actually find that really freeing. It's like, okay, cool. So I don't need to, why can't I just review a book? Like, if I get sent a book, nothing says the author has to come on the show. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I'm excited to find out. That's my version of quitting YouTube, is potentially more work, but I frame it that way so that if you might not be doing, you're probably not doing the exact same thing I'm doing, but I hope some of this is more universalizable outside of podcast host, which is if you are feeling that things are, stale's the wrong word, if you feel like previous forms of nourishing expression now have no nourishment at all. Because the weird thing is the astrology, maybe this is the astrology. The astrology is quite good, reasonable for creativity and creative changes at the moment. So that's part of it. But what I was going to say there is like the astrology is actually quite good for creativity. So if you're feeling stale, it's not that, but it kind of is. Like if you need a second reason, I suppose, to be okay with like, I'm not vibing on this. I'm doing the Substack thing and I'm not vibing. That's going around. And it's going around, I think, because reality is shifting, and this is the other reason why we resort to memes. Like, it's not so much that the trickster is easier or the jester is easier, but also it's the thing you do when stuff is tough. So, yeah. I'll certainly be doing more video. That's one thing. So there'll be more, I think I said this before, but like, and everything that is on YouTube will end up on Rumble or Odyssey for the people who make noble, I guess, decisions to avoid Google products. And it is noble, but I think particularly at this stage in this episode, you kind of get what I mean by like there isn't a clean place to go. You can't get, although this sounds pretty good, you can't get a dumb phone and just watch Rumble on your Linux laptop. I don't think that's how we go through this transformation. And that doesn't mean like drill baby drill, but that just means examine whether your moral boundaries need to be transformed to accommodate something new. I don't know. It's something like that. I like these live streams because it's just thinking about as I go along. I think this is what I mean. I do want to talk about future media. So that was YouTube, then me. Future media in general. Short form vertical is, I don't want to necessarily say over because TikTok is still huge, but it's not the answer. And we don't get out of this looming war with China with TikTok intact. Now, I have more to say about the TikTok ban, which is that it is, as is usual with things that get bipartisan support, The plan is for control over the whole internet and app ecology. That's how it's worded. So be very careful. This is what I mean by like, I don't think you should use TikTok for all the reasons they list. Like, none of those reasons are wrong about the spying and the data collection, all that. That's all correct. I don't think banning is how. I never think banning is is how things should be going. That's just like part of the anarcho-libertarian approach, I suppose. But Shorts has failed as well, so and it might take YouTube down with it. But the audience is either fake. So the TikTok audience is fake. I have friends who have millions of TikTok followers, and they can't get 8 people to sign up to something. There are 2 things going on there. The numbers are fake because it's part of the literal Chinese government's attempt to keep you addicted to the app by providing that dopaminergic uplift of like, oh, 150,000 people saw that. Oh, I got 10,000 subscribers, like followers. That's fake. Like, it's literally fake. They're not there. They're just numbers that are added to it because it gets you more addicted and kept in the app. And you can tell that by the engagement afterwards. The other reason the engagement is so low is that it's not a platform. This sounds silly because it started off as a platform for children to dance around to songs with. But it's not a platform where people can find the real you, so that they're not actually emotionally invested in you as some kind of creator, or not even, I hate that word, but like just as a human. Like, oh, what's Alicia doing tonight? Or, you know, how was her holiday? Or like, you don't get that level of connection. So you might sub to someone because you saw something cool on the For You page, and that's just it. Do you know what I mean? So it's certainly not the future, particularly when we think about what community looks like post everything else, post whatever's going on. And Shorts doesn't even have the audience for TikTok. Like, Shorts is just, hilariously, Shorts is the Chinese knockoff. Do you know what I mean? Shorts is like, this is TikTok, but worse. So that's not the answer either. But I just think structurally it's not the answer. First of all, you certainly can't say anything. And this is something Emma Chamberlain, speaking of successful Zoomer podcasters in a weird way, she was on TikTok. Obviously, she's huge on YouTube, but she was on TikTok and quit and deleted it and canceled her account or whatever middle of last year. And she was asked about it. I think I mentioned this in a previous World Without Sin or somewhere, why she did that. And she started off saying, I didn't like who I became as a creator with that app, because you would you chase that dopaminergic high of doing something that's trending and getting a whole lot of views. She got kind of halfway through saying that and then said, I have nothing of value to add or share on that platform. That's absolutely the right and nice way of saying you're not getting a great American novel out of TikTok. So you ask yourself, when it comes to platforms and creative expression, do you have anything of value to share on this platform that would make it better? Do you know what I mean? Rather than, because I get asked this quite a bit, like, oh, do you think I want to grow my astrology business? Do you think I should do TikTok? And I'm like, well, I'm just going to steal from, I think she's 22, a 22-year-old American woman who never went to college. Do you have anything of value to add to that platform? I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. And more like, I truly, there you go. But similarly, if you do use TikTok, you can modify that question and be asking yourself, am I adding value to this platform? I don't know. So Web 4.0, which isn't a thing, that's just what I'm calling it. It doesn't really have a name because it's just the apocalypse or the meme apocalypse. It's basically Web 2.0. So in the same way fashion has gone back to the noughties, it looks like digital sensibility and taste has as well. Web 2.0, for those who weren't around, and I wasn't because I was 27, I'm 27, I definitely wasn't working for companies like MySpace at the time. Web 2.0 was this powerful transformational moment where the web organized around you. Do you remember when Time magazine made you Person of the Year? Was that 2006? Something like that. That's kind of back. but it's back in a way that's less awful, which is great. And this is what's actually underneath the lower quality, more hectic Zoomer video aesthetic, and less of the fake, less of the polished Instagram Peter McKinnon aesthetic, is the reality of it. Like, it's like Verite 2.0, Verite Web 2.0. As we hit this AI moment, God, can you imagine being a faceless YouTube account or even just a tech reviewer? By the end of next year, hotter versions of you will be doing better versions of it, right? And they won't have to be paid. We actually want the hot messes. This is what I mean by like, oh, how was Alicia's holiday? Like, I actually want to know how that was, rather than show me things to do, like a fantastic Thera Santorini travel vlog that is all AI. Like, I don't want that. I'm making this woman up, but like, show me Alicia. What did Alicia do? How was her holiday to Thera Santorini? Like, I want that more than I want like Thera Santorini, which is good. So I think there's something, this is coming back to the medicine of the jester, as we come to the end of the actual podcast component. There's something to the medicine of the jester, the medicine that the jester brings, that matches that, which is the reminder that you are human and you have foibles and you will trip over your buckled shoe or your ermine coat or what have you. And that's fine. That's silly. That like trips happen and foibles exist. And that's some of the medicine that's in there. That's like the breaking of the world without sin. In a world without sin, the king never trips on his shoe or his cloak. It works. So in an AI world, and even actually, frankly, in a couple of years, AI will get that as well. But it still won't be you doing that trip, your foible, your finger on the goddamn lens as you're like videoing the whatever in Thera Santorini. And that's what's coming back. So like we've gone from the devil and we've gone from spice planets to missing princesses to the devil, brief tour through Auschwitz. But this is what I think happens with the meme apocalypse. This is why I think we are cleaving to the jester archetype, even in the face of good things. Like, because June is really good. If you take nothing else from this episode, it was a fantastic movie experience. But in answering why we memed it, it's because it's like a temporary love language on the way to you, in hopefully a good, non-self-serving Web 3.0 Instagram perfect sense, but you in I like this. And that's what I think. That's where I think we find the meme apocalypse. That's where we find ourselves and the medicine, I guess, in the meme apocalypse. I'm pretty excited for it because I mentioned this on the slide that I'm looking at here. I especially during the last 3 or so years, said, but always, like the podcast episodes with Austin, whatever, I'm like, listen, I will only make one promise, which is that I won't lie. And I thought that was an easy promise to make, but fucking almost no one else made it. So I'm happy being wrong, but I won't lie. And so I'm kind of oddly looking forward to, I mean, I'm sweating like a nun watching porn during a Paraguayan heat wave. So I'm obviously okay looking looking TikTok ready, if not Instagram ready, right? But that, I think I would like to see more of you guys living in that kind of way and expressing the you-ness, because if you want to do this, and it's a Pete Carroll thing, funnily enough, not really, but in Pseudonomicon, I think, Psychonomicon, I can't remember, but he says, I want you to write out exactly what you can do that a computer can't. And if you can basically list what a computer can do, then it can do it better than you. It's a bit clunky and it didn't quite work out, but that's absolutely the case for AI. So if you think about if someone was to ingest your social footprint, your email, everything else about you into an AI, what things could it do? It could do 95% of what you do online. Do you know what I mean? It knows what you like, so it knows that you knows to double tap like certain things and not others. But what can't it do? And I don't know, head in that direction. And it might not even be something that it actually, let me change that completely. If you can articulate what it can't do, then it can do it. That's what I was trying to say. So it's more a feel and a direction. Web 4.0, it's not going to catch on. Like, oh, this is what I should have called it. Web 2.02. Yeah, something like that. But you're back, baby. And you're back with, I don't know, cellulite, toilet paper on the underside of your shoe. And we are quite literally all here for it. Yeah. So that is the World Without Sin Memepocalypse. I promised two other things in this one, which is the life update. And then we'll get on to the Q&A. If you're listening to the audio version, you're just going to get the life update. So speaking of me, because obviously we were just talking about you on the other slide, some have noticed the radio silence / disruptions to regularly scheduled programming this year, which is to say I was going to take a couple of weeks off podcasting whilst I filmed the prayer course, which I absolutely loved, and thank you all for the feedback on it. And then I was going to do a couple of shows, but this will be relevant in a moment. The self-imposed curse kept getting, you can't imagine. I mentioned in the brief podcast episode from Canberra, the amount of things that went wrong and continued to go wrong that I caused, which I'll explain on this slide, meant that 2 weeks became a month. And then, so I've been in Paraguay almost exactly a week to the hour because I got in last Sunday evening. And I booked I'm in this Airbnb for a couple of weeks while I do some work, but it wasn't ready. And so I just booked into like a white box temporary apartment for foreigners thing, place I'd stayed at before. There's a heat wave. That place, they had unscheduled, allegedly, water. And so I had to move from that apartment to another apartment. And the heat wave caused a blackout at that apartment, so I didn't have internet there. So I had to move for the 2 days to a hotel, which turned out to be a notorious narco hotel. I had a great time. That's me there on the rooftop of a narco hotel. Not that got in the way of it so much, but there wasn't really anywhere to film other than my tiny, cool little room. So what became a month, it became a month and a half, and here we are. The funny thing is I actually have one in the can that needs to come out in conjunction with the next animism video. So that's been part of it, but it's also, like I think I explained, I guess, by talking about the podcast, my version of burnout, which is, I certainly have, in a way, but it's more, I'm trying to work out, and it's not an intellectual workout, it's a feeling out what creativity I am called to in this moment, I suppose. So some of it has been the general busyness of filming an animism series and the course and so on. And the other is the burnout. And when I say burnout, if you watch the New Year's videos, I did a sequence of videos about New Year's. My priority for this year is autonomic regulation, specifically up-regulating my parasympathetic system. And there's a Navajo prayer, an understanding of Navajo prayer where if you pray for patience, what happens is the cosmos will give you situations that test your patience so that you get better at it. And I absolutely think there's something to that. I think that's part of like a hermetic co-creation style thing. So if you pray for autonomic regulation, if you pray for and set powerful intentions and sigils for being in a parasympathetic state more than a sympathetic, and reacting appropriately because you are autonomically regulated to unforeseen disruptions, to frustrations, traffic, no internet in Airbnbs, all that kind of stuff. If you pray for autonomic regulation from a Navajo perspective, you're going to end up with a very frustrating year. Which is what I mean by I caused it. Because it was so, I mean, I mentioned it in the previous podcast. It's so bad that I had my Brazilian friends going, "Are you sure you're not cursed?" And I'm not. Like, and I've had that externally validated. It's not just mine. I'm actually quite difficult. Don't get any ideas. But I'm reasonably good with my wording. I'm like, yeah, it's, oh, I caused it. I caused it with... and particularly because although I haven't done any sigils in Paraguay, so I now have another 8, or I guess 9 shit to do tomorrow. I mentioned before the cross currents. So you set powerful intentions for autonomic regulation, which, by the way, is successful. Like I'm definitely improving. And one of the reasons I'm here for a length of time is, and I say this with all love, because I certainly find, strangely, Latin America relaxing, is nothing works here. So, especially in Paraguay, but in general, like everything. I've mentioned this before, but because they've never built to the technocratic reliability that the West has. When I got into this apartment this afternoon, there's about 10 things I could tell you that just make no sense, except that it's Latin America and that's how it is. There are no butter knives. And there's like 10 steak knives. It's Paraguay. They eat a lot of steak. I'm vegan this year. No butter knives. There were no butter knives in the previous 2 apartments. There's a blender, but there's no butter knives. The coffee machine is in this corner beside the TV and the kitchen is over. It's like, if you were looking for hundreds of things that would previously frustrate you, come to Latin America and see how you're going from a tranquilo perspective, because I'm fine. It's actually quite good. My Bolt driver, Bolt is like Uber. I'm here getting my 130 kilos of luggage because I'm here for some time. From the hotel to this Airbnb, the first one pulled up, wound the window down and said, "My Spanish, I can't speak it that well, but I'm starting to improve my comprehension." Basically like, "Oh, I don't do luggage." All right, I'm just out in 38 degrees with 130 kilos of luggage. That kind of stuff. And I have this take, just as a side, that why it's frustrating in the West is you pay a lot and then things don't work. So Australia is an extremely high tax country. So when things don't work infrastructurally, it's like, well, this is the worst of both worlds. Paraguay is a no tax country, basically. So things don't work, but you aren't paying for it, right? It's weird. It's like, it's almost like a in between libertarian utopia and, I don't know, fully automated luxury space communism, is if you don't, like, there are no butter knives, so I shall have to buy them. They will not cost very much money. Neither does this Airbnb compared to Australia, for instance. So fine, right? Like, you either have incompetence, and I think that's why it doesn't upset me. It's like, it's upsetting when you pay for reliability. So you're putting in the cost of being in like a digital prison and it doesn't work. If you're not putting in the cost and things don't work, it's like, well, what did you expect? It's really interesting. I'm sitting with that. But anyway, so autonomic regulation is a priority. And how I had this explained to me by someone who works in a healing field as well. Because if you're a shamanic healing client, I actually said this to James, it's not a problem, but not to book any for this year, because I'm going through a bunch of healing stuff that doesn't make me at my best, which I need to be. It's a funny job, right? People, and thank you for your patience if you've been moved around as a client. I think shamanism or any of these healing modalities, this is almost a should you pay for magical services or not question, is yes, you should, but they don't fit inside capitalism. So with shamanic healing, if I'm not coherent, then I am just taking your money. Like, I can't do the job. So it's like, what do you want? Do you want me to cancel, or do you want me to take your money and you get nothing? Because you get nothing either way. But if I cancel on you, which is, I'm not saying it's like last minute canceling either. I'm talking like, don't have any sessions this month. If I close off the sessions, it's because I can't do it. Now I'll take your money and I still won't be able to do it, or you can keep your money and I still won't be able to do it. This seems very logical to me. But because I'm on a mission or a intention year of healing autonomic dysregulation that emerges from childhood trauma, which I'll tell you about in a minute, to do with, no, I'll just tell you now. So it's, as I get better and better at this healing stuff, as is usually the case when you go through you become a doctor and this happens. It suddenly occurs to me how bad my father actually treated me. So I have a pattern of behavior where I will work for praise because I grew up in an environment of uneven or unreliable love and affection. And the way to stabilize that sense of safety is to achieve and overachieve, because at least then that leads to a reliable signal of love and acceptance that I otherwise don't get. And if you're a child, here's the key. This is why it stays with you into adulthood and dysregulates your autonomic system, is a child can't take care of itself. So if it perceives that a parent doesn't love it, it'll die because it can't do anything. So the lack of overworking, if I come down, and I know that I'm talking to a couple of you in particular here, but if I come down from 120% work down to a normal, I don't know, 80% capacity work, I get stressed. I start to get anxious. And I start to get anxious because the childhood behavior kicks in of, you're not going to get praise for doing all that work, and thus you're going to die. So one of the things that's been, this is, when you embark on a shamanic healing project, like setting the intentions to do your autonomic regulation, it's hyperdimensional. So I set that intention that by the end of the year, regulation, blah, 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 blah. And so I get given these situations where I have to heal and transform. And this is a big one, right? So not being able to have the internet for 3 weeks whilst I'm going out there working, like I'm out there in the desert filming and like living out of a suitcase. And when you're whole food plant-based, living out of a suitcase means I'm carrying with me large blenders and all kinds of stuff. It's crazy. Anyway, I'm getting the double hit of like, okay, cool. You need to like objectively work less. But now we're going to put you in a situation where you don't even have connection to the internet. And we're going to put you in a situation to potentially disappoint some people. Those two things are your kryptonite, right? Because those are the two things that activate, but you're aware of it now, that activate that childhood trauma pattern of like, oh, if I don't overachieve, I'm going to die. Because the thing is, especially now that I'm still only 27, second half of life, I will die. Like I literally will die if I continue to overwork. So I have arranged a year where I am in situations where I have to intellectually and with breath work and just like, okay, you're in a situation that has allowed the trauma pattern to come up. Do you wish to hit go on this program? And that's kind of where I'm at with it. So that's kind of speaking of me, where things are. And in that funny circular way with Paraguay, I got quite, this one's too long to go into now, but after I came out of hospital in Paraguay last time, the update, I guess you could call it, from Pachamama, like being here on the actual South America soil, was the whole food plant-based. And it was because of the autonomic regulation. And I got back to Australia, jumped into it, and within 3 or 4 days of getting off animal proteins and all the rest of it, I felt like what normal people feel like, oh wow. I can not rage out an 11 out of 10 if someone cuts me off in traffic. I can just do a normal 4 out of 10, right? It's not that you don't like not feel stuff. So that whole process of being in a regulated state more of the time was the trigger for, oh, I guess you have enough capacity left in between maximum and where you are at a normal operating to start doing some of the heavier, bigger stuff. Like, okay, well, now you're going to do the childhood stuff, because instead of operating an 8 and the childhood stuff would bring you to a 13 and kill you, you're down here at a 3 or 4, and working through that childhood trauma stuff is going to bring you up to a 7 while you while you go through it. But that's been really fascinating. I will do probably at some stage in the next month or so a full deep dive into the whole food plant-based thing, because that was last year was my booze-free year. This year is my whole food plant-based year. But yeah, so that's what else have I got on that slide? That's the update from me as to where I was and almost like how I am. And I put it here after the you stuff, because if you've listened this long, there's a slight chance you might care. It's cool if you don't. If you hung out for the world without sin stuff. But that's where it was. That's what was going on. Some of it was busyness, and some of it was just like, I had a couple of, after the mountain, which is the final of the animism videos, when I was in Melbourne, I had a couple of like really, really low days because of digital stuff that was just so improbable. It's that whole like, are you sure you're not cursed thing? Like, I called James at one point saying like, you just, because he's not magical, and so I'm like, just tell me I'm not going crazy. Do you know what I mean? Because that is why it felt like a curse. So my Brazilian friends like, it feels like a curse because if you're interested, or if you're on the lookout for, have I been cursed? Is the best kind of curses are strings of improbable stuff, almost like designed to send you insane. Like designed, like it's right on the edge of improbable. And if people weren't there for the previous 50 things that have gone wrong, and you flip out, they don't have the context for it. But it, like the pattern was magical, definitely, but it wasn't curse. So with some practitioners that I'm working with now and my own healing lineage spirits, I'm in a situation where they kept assuring me, like, it's not only is it not a curse, you did this, you dumb bitch. I added that bit. They didn't say that. But I had a couple of really like low days. I maybe more hyper, but terrible. I had a couple of very awful days in Melbourne. So it's really good to be back in South America with its, funnily enough, many, like I just listed all the things that went wrong. The moving to 3 different apartments, the Bolt drive. This is just normal South America. And it's so weird that it not only doesn't affect me, I enjoy it, or it relaxes me. Now, it helps that I have a level of income that I guess keeps me so that if everything goes really wrong here, it's not like in Australia, like, because then my income kind of matches and it's the same. You get what I mean? But even just on my journey, it's like, okay, all this stuff's still going on, but you're in a situation to use it as training to respond in that Navajo way of praying for patience. In my case, I guess to some extent it's patience, but it's like praying for autonomic praying for autonomic regulation means a year of situations that will test how regulated you are. In the cosmic shamanic gym, I suppose. Final slide, conclusion. What we got coming up, there will be more of the Animism series video. There'll be one out this week, depending on when you're watching or listening to this. And I'm going to do other videos while I'm here. I'm here principally, I have to, it's weird, like I can't, this is part of my healing journey. I can't say to you, because I feel self-conscious saying, my priority being here is my healing. I have to say, because the second bit is also true, I am here completing of more research for the final book in the Dot trilogy, because writing theoretically relaxes me. Like I don't want to stop work. I want to work in a healthy way. I want to work from a soul place rather than a place of trauma pattern, I guess. But part of that is I feel self-conscious saying that my priority while I'm here is my healing, because that activates that childhood thing about, oh, well, then you won't be loved, because you only get parental affection when you achieve. But nevertheless, I do actually have some stuff to do here, which will involve videos and research. So look forward to that. I do have a couple of clients who, again, if you're listening, thank you for your patience. I hope this has clarified some of it for you. I do have a couple of clients that I haven't been able to move that are this week, but then otherwise, I'm going to see how the autonomic gymnasium goes and open it up. But there's some more like I'm really excited to share with you some of the discoveries, like literal discoveries, new to the West that I've made while I'm here, and some really powerful trainings and adventures and so on. So all of that's coming up. In the more germane internet-y kind of world, there'll be more podcasts, like I said. Also, I haven't watched it yet because once I'm done with you guys, it's my evening entertainment. All of this is linked up below. If you're on the live stream, it's obviously not, but if you're listening to it, this is the show notes. Atomic Gods, Magic Beyond the Nuclear Horizon by Peter Gray. You can watch that. That's his Culture Berlin 2023 presentation. The Missing Witches fundraiser. It's that time of year again. The Canadian ladies got in touch, and that's come around. So the link to do that again, drop some lazy loonies. Apparently, Rune Soup listeners did an amazing job of supporting the Indigenous Women's Shelter that they support on an annual basis. So I'll certainly be putting more money in. You guys should as well. J.F. Martel of Weird Studies and former podcast guest, I must have him and Phil this time back on, has a course on the films of Stanley Kubrick coming up at the end of this month, which I won't be here for and thus not do, but I might catch it on the replay, if you will, because that sounds really fun. And speaking of courses, the premium members know this. The next premium member course, beginning I guess in May, is... It's got a bit of a long name. There's an explanatory video in the members area if you are a member listening to this and you haven't caught it yet. Grimoires 2, Your Greek Inheritance, bracket the Jake edit. And this is, we've done Grimoires 1 years ago. I think it was our second course. And I was looking back on it in preparation for organizing this one. And it's the first one tracks let's call it the textual history of the grimoires. And it's almost like high Catholic, not actual Catholic, but it's very down the line, and it's absolutely the right place to start. And then as I played with some almost like, I guess, beginner suggestions in the Foundations Magic course, that's where it twigged in my head that, oh, you should do another one. And it should be, why it's called the Jake edit is, of course, after the great, late lamented Jake Stratton Kent. And his thesis, which we will wrestle with, that the grimoires represent, that's the wrong word, the grimoires are invitational avenues back into your Greek inheritance. One of the things that's been really popular, and it's having a moment, which I'm really excited, not because of me, but like I'm really excited that it's having a moment. The various hymns, obviously Orphic, but Homeric. That's what I mean by Greek inheritance. And Jake could, with his own idiosyncratic way of doing history, find a way into that which is very definitely yours in the grimoire. So we're going to be looking at that. I'm speechlessly excited for this one. It feels really right to be doing some, like, I don't know, proper Jake magic. And I fancy that he would appreciate that it's going to be filmed in South America amongst, Quimbanderos and others that, more on that when we actually do the course. So that's the big announcement. If you are looking for a grimoire course to do, if you're looking for a magic course, the next one coming up for the premium members is Grimoires 2 or Electric Boogaloo. I don't know. But it's like your Greek inheritance. We're going down the Greek line of the grimoires, and more like using the grimoires, as I believe Jake did, to open that door for you in a, I don't want to use the words legitimate or justifiable way, in a welcoming and invitational way. And speaking of Jake, I had this pre-ordered. It's just funny timing. Hadean Press has just released Cyprian's Offices of the Spirits, which is the second of the posthumously published Jake Stratton Kent books. I pre-ordered the fancy double combo, which is obviously on its way to Tasmania as we speak. So that book's probably not going to be in the course. But if I was, if I'm mentioning Jake, I did just want to point that out as well. All right, so that's it. That's the audio version of the podcast done. If you are listening to it and you're like, okay, now maybe I want to know more about... Oh, hang on. Before you go, I want to tell you my Jaguar travel story. This is part of the life update and part of the magic and part of the curse. I'm showing on the screen, if you're listening to it, a picture of my obsidian Jaguar in pieces. My mother gifted me this Christmas before last. So she bought it in, I guess, November 2022. And it's an obsidian Jaguar from Mexico that she didn't get in Mexico. She bought in a crystal store somewhere in the Hunter Valley. I don't know. She's friends with the owner. And obviously, Otorongo is one of my healing spirits in my healing lineage. So this one has been part of my mesa and has been all over the world in the last couple of years. Well, Southern Hemisphere, some Northern. And I would always, and I still do, but I would always wrap things up extra carefully in the luggage. And the last time I was here, my hummingbird broke on the way over. And this time it was the Jaguar. And I will say I got a bit cavalier because it's a big carved bit of rock. And it was in, like, how is in a thick, a firm suitcase, a shell case, like how is that going to break? And so it's not like it was floating around in there. It was in there kind of nestled, but I didn't, delicately wrap it in a sock and blah, 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 blah. So I get to Asuncion and last Sunday, and I open the bag and it's broken. I'm like, no. First feeling was guilt. Then tuning in to Otorongo, as like, how are you feeling? Sorry about your break. And what came back was Latam break, and it was break. And I'm like, okay, cool. So Latam broke it. I'm not that surprised. I actually think it might have, like the physical act may have happened as my bag. I was watching the baggage handlers at the airport in Asuncion basically hurl them. I think that might have been it. But Latam break, and it actually showed, if you can see the picture there, like the front limb, he was looking at the front paw and saying Latam break, even though the back ones had come off as well. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Thank you. You seem to be all right. But I got the impression that the statue had sacrificed itself, so it broke rather than I did. So it was like, it was like a protective charm that broke, protecting me from a worse travel fate. I'm like, that's a bit weird, but like, good. That's how they're supposed to work. I've lost an ayahuasca pendant to a similar thing. So I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, it is a pretty hectic place to get to. So, and it's fine. I'm in South America. I will find another Jaguar statue at some place. I got like the symbolism of it. The Jaguar is a protector in the system. Latam break. Like, okay, cool. Then I wake up the next morning and find a news article that James sent me about a Latam flight from Sydney to South America, to Santiago, via Auckland, that I would have been on. Which had a very serious mid-air, it's another Boeing Dreamliner situation, which had a very serious mid-air incident in between Sydney and Auckland, where the plane just plummeted, just dropped like a stone. And they're trying to say it was like the pilot hit a handle or whatever, but like we don't know what went on. But there were people who didn't have their seatbelts on, like hit the ceiling. There's one, you can look up the New Zealand Herald article because they have the best stuff because they were waiting at the airport when this plane showed up, right? One guy described how he was seatbelted in and he was looking at someone else who was like the Exorcist, like he'd hit the ceiling, but his back was on the ceiling. So they were just making eye contact. This guy who was stuck on the ceiling of an airplane, plummeting, making eye contact with this guy who's still in his seat, obviously not in a pleasant way, with the seatbelt on. And then when it corrected, all these people came crashing back down. And that's what all the injuries were from. Like, so this guy Latam broke his face and his arm and whatever on the armrest as this came smashing back down. And that's the flight I would have been on. And this Jaguar, because I'm pointing to it over there, you can see it on the pictures, is broken in the places that I would have broken because I would have hit the roof and come back down on it. And I'm like, that's what Latam break is. And so I messaged my mother that she's on holiday somewhere else. I messaged my mother saying, oh, that Jaguar you got me broke. And last night, Oterongo told me Latam break and kept showing me these limbs. Then I see this article of this flight I was going to be on. And she's like, wow, well, he did a really good job. And she says, you never guess what? And she sent me a picture of like the exact same stone Jaguar, because there was only one in the store. She bought that for me in November of 2022. And said, and the guy who owns the store, because they're friends, was like, oh, I'll just order you another one. She's like, great, because she wants one as well. Guess what day it showed up? So, and I obviously offered it to her, like, no, I think that's yours. But she's like, no, I think it's yours. It showed up on the same day yours broke, saving you from, I mean, not a plane, I mean, maybe, but like not a death on a plane, but like, I think it's yours. I think that anyway, I thought I'd end with a little magical story for you. So I thought I was going to get my replacement Jaguar here in South America. What I will do, because my mother doesn't listen to these, I will buy her a Jaguar somewhere in South America. And I will take this, which is plainly mine, that's back there in Australia, that showed up from Mexico, and she got a message from the guy the day this one happened, and the Latam story happened. So, yes, magic, ladies and gentlemen. I recommend it. Well, thank you for listening, if you're listening to the audio version. And we will have, I think, another podcast this week, and hopefully get into a bit more of a rhythm of doing these lives and doing the, doing the interview shows and all the rest of it. But have a lovely week. Thank you for listening. And for those of you in the Q&A, let's do it. Alrighty, 207.52. I can remember that. And I will just embiggen myself now. Okay. I'm going to move stuff around because I had it all set up for filming. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just try and angle myself slightly so I can hear and watch your questions. Awesome. Well, let's do it, ladies and gentlemen. Do you have a question? Sigil 70. How would Viveris de Castro interpret the Jaguar travel story? I don't know. I mean, mine is a perspectivist one, but I don't think he is a perspectivist. I think he just writes about it. So he certainly has stories like, well, not exactly that, but he certainly has stories of the efficacy of Amazonian magic, that's for sure. So it would not... I don't think he would bat private eyelids. Academic eyelids, who knows? Yeah. Have you heard of Leighton Ullery? She is a detransitioner who is suing her doctors for medical malpractice, and she has a blog about magic and anthroposophy. She would be an interesting guest. I have not. It's not a world I know much about. I've been thinking since, Jay, you got a mention? I've been thinking since we talked about making and creating that if you look like you're having fun on the internet, people will stick around. Has a sort of Zoomer chaos energy. Yeah. But it's funny, like, yes, simply, it's the first bit. You are correct. But isn't that life? Like, yeah. It's good advice. Because also, if you look like you're not having fun at I don't know, a mixer, a BNS ball, speaking of my mother, as she would call them. Yeah. I lived in Asuncion, a special place. It is a special place. No one, like, I was talking to I wanted to go on this whole rant about digital nomads, but not because, I mean, I am, that's the wrong word, anti them, but in the same way that the Instagram Peter McKinnon lifestyle is ending because of denialism and cost. The same is true of digital nomads. Having said that, I was catching up with a Israeli digital nomad, a bit older than me, 29, 46, and he was leaving Asuncion early because he's like, this is the most boring city in all of South America. And I'm like, no, Montevideo is the most boring city in South America. But he didn't get it. And Asuncion, but like, it is. But I like it. Nothing works. It's stupid. It's weird. It shouldn't be here. When it rains, no one goes out because it has no floor, like no guttering, so everything floods. But I have expat friends here who are like, if you get it, you get it. It's Paraguayans are, I was about to say amazing and friendly, and they're amazing and friendly to foreigners. It's an interesting country in that respect. It's very open to foreigners because no one comes here. But they're kind of like, this is a weird way of saying it, Planet Express stuff, because it's a country of pirates and smugglers, and a very bribable police force. So they're kind of jerks, but like the Planet Express stuff, they're actually jerks with a heart of gold. So they're not like scammy or swindlers or anything like that. But the energy of the place is very pirate, but they're pirates with a heart of gold. So yeah, and it's I'm scared someone will call me on my Spanish because I keep saying my Spanish is improving. It is, but it's improving off a very low base. So I don't want people to ask me something in Spanish. But they're kind of like the French. I've noticed the difference between last time where I had zero Spanish basically, and now where I'm saying wrong sentences, but I'm conveying what I mean. If they're so much friendlier if they're like, oh, he's making an effort, which it's completely fair, right? But no, I I understand why people don't come here, but I also really understand the people who do and get it. 'Cause it makes, I don't know what to tell you. It makes no sense. But it's a good spot. Yeah. The end of TikTok. Do you suppose it's a bang or a whimper whenever the legalities hit? I think it will. So what I expect to happen is that some version of the US law will pass. Well, it kind of has been unanimously voted on. But ByteDance will capitulate and there will be a shit version of TikTok in the US. The reason they want to do this is so that they have message control heading into the election. That's why Trump's against it, because at the beginning of, like, at the moment, well, there's two reasons why. He met with a TikTok lobbyist who is giving money to his campaign, but he is a billionaire. So I think the 50,000 or whatever that went into the campaign probably didn't sway the needle as much as realizing that the American version of TikTok is going to be get the same pressure on it that during the pandemic Facebook and Twitter got. So it's a bang and a whimper. So it'll be like, oh, okay, cool, you can still use TikTok now that it's American. But it'll be shit because they will make it worse. So because it's the only thing they know how to do. So as for like, you won't. I mean, I think it less likely that Americans will wake up one day and TikTok will not be on their phone and will not be available in the App Store. I think it more likely that it'll, like, you'll get a shit version of it. And it's funny, like I said, I don't believe in banning things, but I get why, I really do get why people would want to. And I would just do it for piss and vinegar reasons. Like, there's certainly Facebook and, well, what is it now? What are we calling them? Meta and Alphabet and so on are definitely in the ear of their various elected representatives. And they, frankly, the point I would make is that we allow Chinese apps and they don't allow ours. And the reason the Chinese don't allow them is, well, because they're spying apps. But even if it wasn't, even if it was just straight up capitalism, there's a tit for tat case for going, you know what, fuck you. And there's, I don't believe in banning, but I absolutely understand why there's such impetus behind it, because it is a nightmare platform that has no redeeming qualities, run by a government that like won't let the other side have their own nightmare platform. Anyway, you get it. Any advice for someone who has ignorantly allowed an extreme narcissist into their lives? Obviously, it's partly my fault, but why do empathetic people attract such vampires? Because it's a thing you have yet to heal. This advice is the advice for anything, not just this, which is, it's a weird way of saying it. Uh, Treat it like it's entirely your fault. Because if it's the things that are your fault are the things that you can change. So even though it isn't, because what always happens with unhealthy pairings like that is this person's trauma interfaces rather neatly with your trauma. So empathetic is probably true, but it's also, and I struggle with this, I'll come back to my version of it, but it's also a nice way of saying that you will let people make decisions for you for childhood reasons, because it's always for childhood reasons. So what you do in any situation is to assert like radical responsibility. It is entirely your fault. Please don't freak out if you're survivors of sexual trauma and all the rest of it. It doesn't. It's a spell, right? It doesn't mean that people aren't at fault, but it's where you step in and go, I'm going to treat this situation as if it's entirely my fault, because because that makes it in my control. Like the things that I am at fault for, I can change. So that's how I do any of my stuff this year, which isn't like, so healing from childhood trauma, it's the same situation, right? It's like, okay, well, I will just make it all my fault, but so I can fix it. You don't stay in the entirely your fault form. That would be it. The way we live in the cosmos is we are invited to treat every incident as an opportunity to transform into our best selves while we're still in a body. And that's, psychology is at least initially denatured or demagicked version of that, right? But we're like the cosmos trying to heal through traumas. So that would be, other than like, if that's macro advice, there might be more specific advice for narcissists, but expelling one of them, they're opportunistic infections. Let's take a terrain theory approach. Your terrain, which is to say your biology, attracts a certain kind of bacterium, which is the narcissist. Change the terrain, you won't get the bacterium. Boring cities for the digital nomad are conducive to work. Yeah. Yeah, but then that's not where they hang out, is it? They all hang out in Bali, pretending that by digital nomad, they mean that they're a travel vlogger vlogging about being digital nomads. That's why I don't like them. It's like it's a human centipede circle of fakery. Yeah. What are some of the ways to protect yourself against malicious forces at work and folks spreading rumors about you in these weird times? I have a whole course on protection and malefica, and there's some good stuff in there on gossip. And I would say take it seriously. I mean, I know you are, but I mean, where we are in terms of late stage capitalism means that it's a game of musical chairs, and instead of one chair that gets taken away, three get taken away. And what keeps you in the game is reputation. And we're all just trying to stay in for as long as possible, right? As long as the barest minimum that we need to. But that means that if people are coming for your reputation in an environment like this, you need to take it magically very seriously. So if you don't want to do the course, invest otherwise because this is a career expense. Like, think about how much you paid for your degree. Take workplace gossip. You should always take it seriously, but take it seriously now. Now especially, because it's like Russian roulette meets magical chairs. Magical chairs, musical chairs. How long? TikTok is the first move to EMP the free internet. Yes, it is. How long do you think before we get the big clampdown? I don't know. It's not a thing that it's imminent because, well, Whitney Webb, actually, I have this somewhere. She was quoting like a Klaus Schwab document that was said by 2024, we've had a major cyber attack that brought down, no, 2025, we've had a major cyber attack that's brought down much of the internet. And that's one of those like event 201 situations where they're scenario planning. So by next year, we've had a major cyber attack that brings down the whole internet. By the way, the Boeing thing, I think part of that, if do not be surprised if the Boeing thing is an op for one of two reasons. This looks like something you do to tank a share price to pick up a military contractor very cheap, because actually a lot of these things go on in the airline industry, like wheels falling off and shit all the time. It's just not in the news. It's not in the news because if you look at companies like Boeing and the amount of money that they pay for advertising, it keeps it out of it. And if I were trying to tank a share price, I would kill a whistleblower and make it look like fake suicide, and everyone's going to think it's Boeing, and then think, oh God, he really must have said something. Oh, there must be something wrong. So there's something else going on with the Boeing stuff. And one of them might be, just to your point about EMP and bringing the internet back in a guardrail digital ID form, is if they ground Boeing planes for safety reasons, that is effectively the same thing as shutting off air travel again for as long as they want, and then they can bring it back with digital passports. So I think round two is upon us, one way or the other. The Boeing story is not as simple as, although this is certainly true, it's not. It's true, but it's like always been true that the airline industry is not anywhere near as safe as you think it is. And all of this stuff stays out of the news. I remember my old boss in New Zealand. He came to visit in London. I'd not long been in London, and he talked about an Air New Zealand plane that, like a 747 or whatever, big one, that crashed in the English Channel. And I'm like, an Air New Zealand fucking passenger jet crashes in the English Channel and we didn't hear about it. And he's like, didn't have passengers on board. It was like testing a new model. It might have been the Dreamliner. But apparently, like, I might be misremembering that. But you can get whole planes fucking crashing into the sea. And by the sea, I mean one of the busiest sea lanes on Earth, right? And it just doesn't make the news. It doesn't make the news because I used to work in travel advertising. I can tell you, if you don't have airline advertising, you don't have a travel section. That's just what it is. Something else is going on with Boeing. And if they ground Boeing planes, we don't have a travel industry. We don't have an airline industry until they say otherwise. And that otherwise will be post-digital ID. Similarly with the digital IDs that are coming for cyber attacks and all the rest of it. I don't know when, we just know it is. So you kind of have to, you get as ready as you can now and you roll with it. Mm. Yes, Trump initially did want to ban TikTok. So that Mike Solana guy from Pirate Wires, who I quoted in the presentation, if you go to Pirate Wires, his most recent post, or whatever, second most recent, is about Trump initially wanting to ban TikTok for all the correct reasons. Again, not approving of banning, but he changed his tune recently, like as in last week, and after he met from like a lobbyist for ByteDance. So there's some money that changed hands. But the one good thing about billionaires in politics is they're actually not as easy to bribe as a Nancy Pelosi. Not that that's not a pro-Trump statement, right? That's just the reality is 50 grand from ByteDance to a campaign when you're a billionaire, like it might have moved the needle. But I'm telling you, I think more likely that the ByteDance lobbyist told him this law is designed to make a shit version of TikTok that is a legal infrastructure for canceling things like Truth Social and regulating the entire internet. And that would have got his attention. Because that's what it is. World without sin, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. You mentioned the recent Haiti and Jake texts won't likely be in the next course. Is there a particular book you will be focusing on? Yeah, the Encyclopedia Goetica and the Greek stuff is centered in Geosophia. So that will be, that's certainly the one that I have found myself dipping back into in preparation for it. And I'll actually, part of it, like, it's funny, I was just going to call it the Jake edit because, as I mentioned to the members in the member video, he would have liked that. He would have found that cute because he was idiosyncratic in his fashion, but very interested in fashion, I guess, and certain looks and so on. So, like, to call it the Jake edit, I fancy in the afterlife he might be chuckling. And that was originally going to be the beginning and end of it because I learned my way back into our Greek inheritance via the grimoires from Jake, so it should be called that, right? But the more I think about it, like, you raise a really good question, which is, I was talking to Peter Gray briefly about this the other week. People don't know how to read Jake, especially now that he's gone. They don't know what he was doing with his writing because he wasn't that good a writer. He just had material that you had to read. But people don't. He wasn't good at explaining what he was doing because that would require him to have been a better writer. But if he was a better writer, he wouldn't have been the sort of mind that found his way into the material that's in the books. It actually needs a cheat code. So some of the course will be that, actually, to be honest. Some of the course will be how to read Jake. Yeah. I'm really excited for Grimoires 2, the Jake edit. Will there be more Zoom chats in the courses forward? Really enjoyed all of the chats last year. Yes, and there will be more member hangouts, just like office hours, now that I'm in the right time zone to be able to do it. So yes, there will. Things have stabilized a bit more in terms of expression. But I think particularly for a course like this, it's going to be necessary. So yes. Speaking of rumors and gossip, can we go back to disappearing princesses? Yes, we can. So I think the stories of the love child that Lady Rose is keeping with William is correct, and I think, and to some extent, I get it. I mean, it's such a weird thing to have sympathy for. I think that would have sent Kate insane, like, even if temporarily, from like a breakdown perspective, because she, from college on, and this is why it's kind of her. Do you know? I know this. Like the night or so before the wedding, like her version of like a hen stew. It was Camilla and a couple of the other, and Princess Michael, and one or two others, not the Queen, but they took it to Claridge's, or some, can't remember. No, somewhere nearby the palace for a drink, and said like, "Do you want to do this? Like, this is how they roll." And the thing is, this is how they roll. And everyone's like, "Oh, it's just like his dad." It's like every motherfucking king and prince anywhere ever. What the fuck, right? Now, that being said, if you are the wife in a situation like that, it's all well and good for your husband to have a side bitch. That's normal royal. But when it's the side bitch is having a kid that he intends to keep because he's in love with her and whatever, like sufficient love and affection, there's no other life for Kate if there's a divorce, like to be humiliated on a planetary level is unprecedented in human history, right? Like there are few women more famous on the planet. Although funnily enough, the one place you can go to avoid discussions of Kate and Will's is Paraguay. Um, that's why I have X. So I get it. I get why I think she is not only having a breakdown, but it's a breakdown and like I'm not cooperating. I think catatonic breakdown. I'm not. If you get me in front of a camera, I will scream. Kind of stuff. That's my best guess because if it is a serious health complication to do with the abdominal surgery, which probably happened, but like they wouldn't be photoshopping pictures. You would just have a video or a photo or something from the hospital bed, her and the kids, because the kids haven't been seen either, right? So at the moment this week, I think it's the full-on breakdown, not cooperating. And on the one hand, I get it, and I definitely have sympathy for her in that respect. On the one hand, I get it. On the other hand, like, girl, you are the mother of the future king of England. What did you think was going to happen? Like, but that's what I think at the moment. That's my spicy take on where she is. I think she's still in London. I think she's in one of the various properties, but no one, even the kids, they haven't been seen. That's what I think. Hey, from Peru, geopolitical update. Any update on the relocation offer? I don't know what that is. There will be another geopolitics update. Well, we'll see, right? Because we've got a very interesting, to say the least, Aries season. So let's see how that plays out, and we might do one immediately after. Well, so at the latest, we will do one after the May 6, May 7 turning point. At the very latest, but it might be before that. Depending on how we get through Aries season. Naturally, my library full of all things Jake is in storage. Looks like I might splurge on paperback copies. Yes, you won't, as with all the premium member courses, you won't actually need books that we read through. Like, it's not like a university thing where it's like, oh, you have to go and buy the readings. So if you don't want to, don't do it. Don't buy additional ones. But that said, what does typically happen is that people get like really into the material and inspired and be like, oh yeah, that is a good book, or that is a good section. I might read that again and want to dip into it for extra reading. But if you don't want the expense and you're worried about missing stuff for the course, you won't miss stuff for the. That's always the promise. You will never need a book, even with ones that have kind of like a book at the middle of them. I guess that's not true. If we do the Arbitel, you would need that, but you can get versions of the Arbitel online. So it's not. In fact, I'm sticking by it. You never need a book. Really excited to hear this new Grimoire course. Yeah, took a break from, but definitely going to jump back in. Welcome back. Thank Rome for instituting St. Patrick's Day to usurp the vernal equinox. See, I'm still Team Snake. They could have picked a better one. This might be my favorite episode name ever. Such a meme moment time we live in. I don't know. It's my Christmas, as Tim Dillon would say. Yeah. And they'll never cop to it because you simply can't have a mad queen at the end. Yeah. I don't know how they get out of this one. I think that's why it's like, oh, she won't have any public engagements until June or July. It's funny because, I mean, obviously we're exactly the same. People make that reference between me and the princess all the time. But like the processing of the trauma, that the setting the intention and the whole food plant-based delivered, like there was some moments like in Melbourne where I'm like, ooh, I'm not okay. Ooh, this is not good. And it's funny, like I think I mentioned to you, Colin, I took some acid with my archaeologist friend in December, late November last year, up in Hobart, and it was terrible. And it's not like bad trip terrible, like nothing happened. We got to the point where we got a few hours in and we're like, I guess nothing's happening. We went walking around trying to find like lights that might do something and just got bored and went to bed. As I was driving back to the valley the next morning, I was coming into the top of the valley and down, and I heard something in my head say, this is your apocalypse configuration. And that really cracked me open as part, and this is funny, like people make this joke and it is kind of a meme, but it's also true if you sit with it that way. Like, when is it a breakdown or is it a breakthrough? I think about, this is the healing modality stuff, right? So when the Gaza stuff started happening, he said, let your heart break open so that it can contain more love. Like that's what feeling of this pain is for. And similarly with breakdowns can be breakthroughs if you attend upon the process and what's going on. Because in that case, for me, maybe the palace will call me and I can help Kate out, and she can come to Paraguay. We'll hang in apparently that narco hotel that I hang out in. Anyway, the week that I did the acid was the week that I moved everything up into the wizard hut. And I was experiencing a lot of feelings doing that. Like, ooh, why is this upsetting? Like, why am I getting irritated? This should be, I mean, it's hard work. I'm moving tons of books and we're laying cable and whatever, but it's not that. It was something else. It's like, why is this, why am I feeling sensitive? And then I get, this is your apocalypse configuration. And it's like, oh, this is like the last piece before, like this is where you are when World War III happens. Do you know what I mean? Like, fuck. And it was part of and therefore you must do this work. You must do this emotional repatterning. You must do this kind of work, part of which is why I'm here. To wit, yeah, Princess Kate, if you are listening and watching, or indeed in the chat, let this breakdown can be a breakthrough. There we go. Relocation offer. You had mentioned you were going to offer a session for people looking to relocate. Oh, right. Actually, yes, some of that will keep your eye out. That may well happen. Flags at half mast and logo changed to black. What's going on? I don't know. All right. When can we expect the next Gordon book, and can we have a hint about its content? Yeah, I mean, it's on. It's a global survey of cunning traditions and is the end of the Dot trilogy. So that bit, the title is still secret, but that's what I'm doing here. I thought it would be done by the end of June, July, but then now I understand why. It's more that setting intention stuff. And actually, if it's about cunning traditions to magic, right? Last year, I came to Paraguay to do some of that work, and I got some of it done. And the hospitalization fucked all that up, and back I went, and I was a bit upset at the universe. Like, you know what? Fuck you. I work so hard, and my reward is to go to some weird little Latin country once a year for a month or so to sit in a cantina and write my gay little books. But had it not gone that way, I would not be back now. And it was on this trip that I have made some like literal discoveries that will make the book so much better. So I'm no longer annoyed at myself that the book isn't out. The book should have been out nowish, like I was going to complete it by the end of the year, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess war notwithstanding, beginning of next year. Speaking of breaking open, I just reviewed the Dr. Desmond interview on Corbett regarding mass formation. As someone who has a lot of Cartesian debris to clear out, it was very helpful. If you've read his book, because I did, Miguel and I got to talk to him while I was in Paraguay, actually, last year. If you've read his book, he's actually, the mass formation book, or the totalitarianism book more correctly, is, he tells it at the beginning, he began a different book, and then the pandemic happened, and he's like, oh, I guess it's this now. Because it was sort of about totalitarianism, but it was more about, the book began in a lack of meaning, began examining the lack of meaning and bullshit jobs and all that kind of stuff, and how that can be the condition for mass formation, and then we got one, right? So it's quite a onesie-twosie book, but there's some all right philosophy in there for someone who's, and I say this with respect, like a down-the-line academic psychologist. Where is the Texas Eclipse Festival? Obviously, it's in Texas, but imagine if it isn't. Okay, cool. I have. How have I been finding sigil a day? Well, mine will net out to a sigil a day. I knew that was going to happen, especially for Q1 of this year, because there was a lot of travel for work that was going to go on, and in particular, there were some places where it didn't feel appropriate. So there are Aboriginal sites that I have been to that you will see in subsequent videos. Obviously, there was Lake Mungo and so on that didn't feel appropriate. So they've chunked and bundled. And this first week in Paraguay, which is always the case, has been wacky. But I got here this afternoon. I unpacked my 130 kilos of luggage into the luggage room, I guess, and unpacked all the shamanism supplies and so on. And in there is my black paper and my paint pens. And I am looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to doing some good South American sigilling probably tomorrow, to be honest. Because if anyone who's been doing it can attest, if you let them build up for too long, it's like, ooh, ooh. There's a few going here. But I'm medium confident. I did just touch my face there. Maybe I'm lying. I'm medium confident that I have done basically one a day. I've probably dropped a couple, but that's fine. I've got the second half of the year to do more than one. I have a list of learnings that I like and observations that I've done so far, and I've been keeping a quiet eye on other people's observations in the Telegram group. So there's going to be update videos on the project, because everyone's like unpacking, which is what I wanted. Everyone's unpacking different parts uh, of their magical practice and finding the areas where they could do with more work. It's like pouring water into a boat to find the leak. If you do a high volume of magic, it's like my statements suck or whatever. Like and the biggest one for me was cross currents. So and the solve for that, if you want to know, I will do a video about it. Is I did several days in a row of different kind of phrasings. It's almost like Wiccan, like Anat Han Ham None. I would recommend to anyone to give a couple of days over to setting sigil statements that say that my sigil statements don't generate cross currents, like they don't impede manifestation. They join for the highest good of all. If you like, join and blend for the highest good of all. That's about 3 or 4. I think I did 3 days. That's about right. Of sigil statements. Use your own words and what you've got going on, but I kept getting cross currents. So I just smashed out a couple of different, like, opening up, clearing statements. And that's like, I'll sit with that. I'll sit with, I mean, it makes sense as I say it, right? If we're co-creating imaginally the cosmos, it makes sense that you do it. You do that to yourself, but you get to see it almost like in real time doing the sigil stuff. Especially if you, which I did, increase the chaos in my life. Like I'm living out of suitcases in fucking deserts and on boats and shit. Like a lot of stuff can go wrong. And when you fuck around at the edges of reality and you increase the chaos, that's just what happens. That's where we live. That's where magic lives. That's the wizard address. So it's just what it is. But there are ways you can make it a little bit homier, and that's one of them. It comes down to needing to do the desire work, and well, jump back in and set a desire work or intention statement for it, like, or for ask the universe to allow and inspire, like, where it fits in your daily, like, nothing prevents you. And honestly, if you're otherwise doing nothing, nothing prevents you from morning coffee as long as you're not like downing it in the car on the way to work. Morning coffee being a like visioning moment or like a cohering moment of setting like day intentions and week and month intentions or lining them out astrologically. Do you know who does that? Fucking no one. And the people who do, something as simple as that change and transforms their lives. That was kind of like the whole point of the foundations, which I say at the end. It's like, fucking no one does any magic. So if you do like the littlest amount, you can night and day change your life. It's wild. I wonder if that counts as doping, using sigils to influence D&D games. But it like I approve. Like, not that you need my approval. I don't mean it that way. Being able to influence contained systems is actually a good way of testing that. Oh, I am in fact doing magic, right? Because you have theoretically randomized stuff like dice rolling and so on. Like it's when I would, because I'm a massive nerd, like when we'd be playing Warhammer 40k, my little brother, who still plays Wardell, is some 40k, but something else now, I forget. He's the dentist, so he paints as well because he has really good little lady fingers. He is unnaturally lucky with dice rolling. Like people don't like playing against him. Similarly, like you can see that something like luck is real if you do gaming, because I haven't done it for a while, right? But I was not, like I was notoriously unlucky from a die roll perspective. Compared to, like, he took all the luck in the family and he still has it. Greedy motherfucker. But the point, I guess, is that you have like a high volume of like randomized stuff going on so that you can get to the end of a campaign or an end of a game and go, you know what, on balance, I was luckier than usual. It's that kind of gambler stuff. So good for you. See, when it's a DM, I actually don't mind that, because as long as you're prepared to play, it's like playing a computer game or whatever on hard. It's like, okay. So, like, yeah. All right. Yes, so many obstacles on writing your book remind me of the members' chat on art when we talked about all the writing we do when not writing. Yes, agreed. That is, funnily enough, part of the autonomic journey. Oh, I wanted to talk about that. So, something Jung says, which I think is very important, unsurprisingly, is we don't heal our complexes, we just get bigger than them. So James's flatmate in Auckland, when we first met, he was just finishing up college and I'd just finished. And in his playwriting class was like, he lived in a share house with a bunch of people all going to the same degree. And they're all still friends, more or less. And in fact, Abby, she was our flatmate in London for years. But he had a flatmate, Paul, who was, he's still alive, is gay. And it's sound a bit mean. It's not really. What were we, 21, 22? He was still a virgin and like sweet 16, never been kissed. And I suggested to James a couple of times, like, can we not like take him out to Flesh? If you were there, you knew. It was just what the gay bar was called. It's not as seedy as it sounds. And because he didn't drink either, and he would sit at home in his room on the computer writing and drinking liters of Pepsi Max. Like the floor was littered with them. Like fucked. And his tutor, James told me this. His tutor said that because he is a brilliant playwright, like obviously dating one, I would have to go to one of the worst things in the world, which is like college theater. And they are as bad as that, but not. Paul's was like, what is this stoppard on acid shit that I'm seeing? It was incredible. And his tutor told James, like, if Paul, like, because if Paul wasn't so Paul, he would not be the genius that he is. Uh, and we caught up years later in London, and he did go on to turn into a normal homosexual, right? But he was, you could see in the plays, and you could see in his behavior, like it's really infantile. It's infantile, like it's healthy, but it's infantile to be 21 and 22 in kind of like a sort of party share house, to never drink, to never hook up, to eat childish things. Like he was not like only eat rice, but it was like only eat Kraft macaroni and drink liters of Pepsi Max. That's someone who is terrified at the threshold of adulthood, like terrified by it, like doesn't, there's something in his trauma, like in his childhood behavior, that makes him afraid to be an adult. And I would guess now, just shamanically, and this is like basic psychology, is that to me an adult is to be a sexual being, and in his case it would be gay, and that, because I know the town he was from risks rejection. Like everything is a play out of like decisions we make as a kid, right? Anyway, point being, coming to me, and when the book comes out, I need to pass which parts of my concern for a deadline come from the trauma, which is like, oh, I've got to get another book out. So I get praise in lieu of love that I didn't get as a child. Like when you say it out loud, the logic is ridiculous. It's like, so you want to rush a book out so that your 6-year-old self has a better childhood. Explain this to me again. That's just how traumas work, right? That being said, just like with Paul, there would be no rune soup had that trauma not happened. So it's not a case of healing the trauma, like expunging it and expelling it. It's getting bigger than it. That's what Jung means, right? Like to acknowledge, oh, that's what that pattern is. And to, in shamanism, we say turn the poison into medicine. So it's how we transform that from not just living in trauma, but to be like, okay, cool. So if that stuff didn't happen to me, I would not have, I guess, prioritized achievement, which got me to the life that I rather like. So it's like, do you want that not to have happened to you? It's like, no, it's definitely not it. What I want to do is like not die of overwork. So I have to just get bigger than that pattern. But it's all still in there. So this is coming back to the book. And the book will be ready when it's ready. And the book is healing me because it is an ongoing engagement. It's another gymnasium for the autonomic system of like the book. And Peter, like, it's very good to have Scarlet Imprint as a publisher, and Peter and Alkistis as friends, right? Because they're my editors, so I can talk to them about the book. And Peter's like, the book's done when it's done. It has its own logic. But I'm like, don't say that. I'm operating out of trauma here. But like, he's correct. And so they're very chill about when the book, they've done that kind of work themselves already, but they're very chill on when the book comes out. And for this one, to complete the Dot trilogy, I get to get bigger than that complex or that trauma, which is exciting. I have thought about the playwright thing as well. I think the human becomes premium. This some future trend forecasters have predicted this. Like you'll get, they thought it would be around foodstuffs and so on, like made by humans and like on jars of like preserves or something. Once we get into the robot era, where we will prioritize things that humans actually make, I think that'll probably happen too. But I think it'll get to the creative pursuits first because we can do it now. It's just shit. But like within 18 months, assuming we don't get the full EMP Mad Max treatment, which I actually don't think we do, you will be able to ask an AI to write a follow-up to Animistic in the style of Gordon White of Rune Soup, covering the applying the perspective as thought of Eduardo Viveras de Castro to the ancestral religions of East Asia and get another book that will include me traveling to like that I have places I haven't been, like Korea and Tokyo and so on, and it will be done. So I think you will get like an actually written by humans on your books, and like, the market will sort that out. And one of them is going to be, I think this is part of comedy coming back. One of them is the return to the re-premiumizing of human experience. The pandemic made people realize, hang on a minute, this is important to me. And this demon, which is the technocratic demon, hates it. I think that was a real shot in the arm of like, no, human stuff is important. And I'm oddly bullish. There is World War III and the breakup of the United States and a whole bunch of other like less great. Although, I mean, World War III's park that one. If the United States breaks open into a happier configuration eventually, then it's the right thing to do. Yeah. My point is, like, I'm on the things to be excited about as we move through some very rough moments on the timeline is the return of the human in art and performance, I think. What would be the healing reframing needed for things like autism and ADHD? Would these things be just what is needed to step into my destiny? No, well, so in shamanism, there are no diagnoses. There are only people. So it's not off the shelf. Do you know what I mean? It's not, oh, well, this is why, like, oh, you have autism, it's this, right? Because first of all, diagnoses are curses, which isn't to say you're not experiencing a differently neuroed incarnation. That being said, there are some trauma patterns. So ADHD, what you want to do is read Gabor Mate's The Myth of Normal, because he is, I think, the greatest psychiatrist since Jung. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. And he has ADHD. And he has ADHD because what happens when you have childhoods of intolerability and you can't do anything about it because you're a child is that you shrink your attention so that you like literally disassociate. So one of the things that he's found, there are nutritional interventions for it, but one of the things that he's found very useful, and it's described in the book, is like understanding that ADHD, that the body, this is shamanism, the body only heals and adapts. It never does anything wrong. So what is the right thing? What situation is ADHD the right thing for? And what can you heal about that situation? See how that will be you specific. That won't be ADHD in general, because yours will be different to Dr. Gabor Mate's, who did that work for himself. Shamans, I currently closed for business, so I can't be like, hey, book a session, because you can't. Read the book. Read The Myth of Normal. Yes, so what James said about reframing would be valuing neurodiversity rather than seeing it as something that needs to be healed. So one of the things that shamanism is better for than psychiatry, particularly with at least how I work with the northern spirits, is when you have identified a set of conditions that you are carrying with you through this incarnation, we can jump up to like the multi or between lifetimes and find, oh, you brought that story in to do these things, which is why I described it as having like a differently neurological or neurologically different incarnation, because that's like the shamanic way of saying what you're saying. I like the word neurodivergent. I don't like the brain part of it. I don't like the neuro, but I like what it stands for. Yeah, good choice. Listen, the state of a lot of things is going to look really bad by 2025. But if you mean publishing as an industry, um, they need to start publishing good books. not the same book every time. It's a mess at the moment. So I hope it dies. Like major publishing is garbage, absolute garbage. So bring it down. That's part of the monolith. I make this joke every time, uh, and it, like the last time, who was this with? Oh, it's when we did at work in the ruins. That so-called independent bookstores only publish one book. This is the monolith. This is the same thing as like Google and its AI having like, I don't know, woke HR policy instead of history. And that one book is Michelle Obama's vegan cookbook of climate change. Now it would be To Defeat Trump. But every book has the same position on reality. And it's the world without sin, neoliberal, orthodox demon fantasy. So it might be a cookbook, it might be a gardening book, it might be whatever. It's all the one book. It's like the Michelle Obama biography, vegan cookbook of climate change to defeat Trump. And so bring it. And I'm not saying you can have that book. This is the anarchist thing. Like read the Michelle Obama biography. I don't give a shit. But like there should be other books available in an independent bookstore. This used to be the place for centuries, I point out, where people would grapple with challenging thoughts, not just now culture is going somewhere to have your militarized neoliberal opinions agreed with. And if they're not, then the event is banned, right? So, and this is what I meant when we talk about Dave Chappelle. He, bless him, we might see some things differently, but bless him for holding the line for what comedy does. And for like remembering that we used to go out to grapple with ideas, not to have some fucking state-sponsored nobody approve, like pat our heads, like you have the correct opinion. You may now go home and express it on state social media. So I hope that publishing industry collapses. How is the new shampoo going? I'm not going to be doing that in Paraguay. When I get back, it will be winter in Tasmania, and then I will do it. I am. So actually, Cam White, because he does know poo, and he emailed me the last time I mentioned it, going like, "I can't believe with everything else you do, you're still using shampoo." And I'm like, first of all, yes. Second of all, I'm not. This isn't like I'm not using Zyklon B. Like this is the bougiest, like least number of chemicals. I'm gonna wean myself. Like it's all natural product kind of stuff. And I'm going to wean myself from that into basically making my own with baking soda and coconut. And from there, I'm going to give myself I'm going to need a month. I'm going to need the month of July in a hat because, yeah, I look like Renfield. When my hair goes a day without washing, I look like I have gone mad and I'm trapped in a Victorian asylum, having become like an acolyte of a vampire. Like I look like a haunted sex pest. And so I just need to be like away from the world while I go through that era. As a playwright of sorts, I'm hoping this is the case. I think it is. I think I think it begins so, and also you can just do it. When I first moved to London, speaking of the flatmate, so James and I were staying with Abby and her then boyfriend in their big share house. This is when we were living in de Beauvoir, so Hackney, basically. We were Hackney hacks. And this is where I befriended a bunch of Guardian journalists because they were all hanging out there. And one night they're like, "Oh, we're doing a Chesterton night." I'm like, "What's that?" I mean, I know who he is, but what is it? I'm like, "Oh, we all come around and we sit in a circle and we just like read chunks of like Jeeves and Wooster, and then we hand the book to the next person and then they read it like out loud, and then we go in a circle because it's Chesterton, so it's funny and amazing. And it was one of the best fucking nights of my life because I'm like, wait, pause. You just sit there like reading aloud from a funny English book. Like, that's right. Are there any drinks? It's like, you can. And it was so good. And I can, obviously, it's great writing, whatever. It was good company, that's for sure. But no, something else was going on there. And it was like, it was ceremony because, like, hang on, we can actually just like get together and perform words. And it's not, I mean, it is magic, but like, and not for magic, just like we can just do this. So coming back to theater having a return, you can just do it. You're probably not going to put on a full play in your 1.5 bedroom Asuncion apartment on a Sunday night. But you can, if you've got a bunch of loser friends like I did, you can be like, hey, don't say no right away, but I think you should come around and it's like a table read, but like we just read from a play until we finish the play. There will be punch and pies to go like South Park on it, right? Like we'll have some tea and we'll just like read aloud from some plays. I had the best fucking night. And I was, I mean, still only 27, but I was young then. I was actually 27. And oh my God, so good. So these are not exactly that, but these are the kind of things that you can just do. You can just live in that new world where like voice and words and humans are there. And if you do exactly this, not necessarily Chesterton, but if you just have people around for like a reading party, those 4 or 5 friends will go to work the next day or whatever. And then, what did you do last night? I'm glad you asked. I went to my friend Sam's house and we read G.K. Chesterton aloud and drank different herbal teas. People will pop up from like the cubicles like, do that. Did you get arrested? Like, that is the best thing I've ever heard. And it will spread. There we go. We can. I will take the credit for it, even though it definitely wasn't my idea. But you can just like fucking do it. That's you just read shit aloud. Why not? Like, it's not quite putting on a play, but you're still voicing words, right? And if you have like ultra gross nerd friends, T. Susan Chang might be a friend. She can sing in Greek. Like, you can hit a Homeric epic. Maybe start with Chesterton. But the key is something that's like funny and is just like cute, glorious words. And that's definitely Chesterton, right? Like, let's not do Silmarillion. I knew Lindale would probably work. But you know what I mean. Worth a shot. Return of the Hot Mess, I'm ready. Yeah. What if AI decides to rewrite reality? It can't. Gabor Mate's book on ADHD Scattered Minds pretty much says ADHD is trauma, right? No, like fair. Because he's in his 80s now, and I haven't read Scattered Minds. I've read 3 of his books. The Myth of Normal is, it's a little bit shit-libby in places. That's just who he is. He's still a genius. But The Myth of Normal is, I don't want to call it an update, but it's how he thinks about what these things are now. And it's like a really good place to start, funnily enough, the most recent one. And then if you're finding medicine in it, go to Scattered Minds. But yes, ADHD, like, it's not so much that it's trauma, it's that the body only heals and adapts. So that is a completely different and radical frame to allopathy or allopathic psychiatry, which is, and the chemical imbalance and whatever theory is always wrong. It's wrong in every category. And he actually has a whole chapter, it's incredible, in Myth of Normal about that. And he's still a practicing psychiatrist and he still prescribes psychiatric medicines. But he does, because it's not like that these chemicals don't alleviate symptoms, but the alleviation of the symptoms does not mean that the model that gives you the drugs is correct, and that's his whole point. So it's kind of bigger than that, and that's why I give like the shamanic answer, like the body only heals and adapts. It literally doesn't know how to do anything wrong. It is trying to keep you on Earth. It is our job to find its logic and respond to it. 2024 seems like a great year for another higher soup gathering. I will be, funnily enough, I might try and get one in South America. That'll still be like 5 or 6 people rather than a big chunk of them. But I will probably World War III, whatever, grounded Boeings, assuming it's not any of those scenarios for the apocalypse. I might actually try to do some in Australia. Because if we combine Rune Soup and higher side chats in places like Sydney, especially, like you get a good number of people. I don't think I make it to Murica for a while, but you're welcome to come to Australia, or you are welcome to. Where else would I be doing it? Come to Paraguay. See, this is Hodorowski should have been allowed to finish June. Oh well. And then the next one, if Hodorowski finished June, we would never have gotten Alien, Predator, or The Fifth Element in particular, which were born from the unrealized creative energies of the artist involved in his June. It's a great documentary, and it's absolutely true. And this is that co-creating with misfortune and reality. It's that Navajo prayer idea as well. That nothing bad actually happens. And so, like my healing teacher, Alberto, learned that from his Quechua teachers, from his Quechua teachers, rather, that even the Spanish conquest was good. Not approved of, but good in the sense that, like, the cosmos is misfortuning, kind of, in an opportunity to create more new and better things, and to invite us to do the same. So, yes, the Spanish conquest and Hodorowski's June. There you go. But I agree. It's like we can frame the lack of the Hodorowski June, which would have been incredible, as but yeah. Do you want that, or would you have wanted Alien, Predator? I can take or leave The Fifth Element, but Alien especially. Come on now. Oh, my toothpaste is basically xylitol and baking soda and coconut. Well, people are just talking amongst themselves about Studio Ghibli. It's all good. I mean, what is that? 3:14 and a half. Yeah, we might shut it down there, kids. I should. It's 8:15. I'll work something out food wise. Nice one. Well, that was a fun Q&A as well. Well done, everyone. Good chatting. But this is a good spot to end it, I think. Thank you so much, and I will hopefully see you all in the next one. Where is my outro?